stand by. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening and welcome to the November 16, 2015 Long Meadow Select Board meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Must we were going to have an exciting meeting tonight. We've got a room full. I was going to change the agenda around and see if we can get the liquor license approval taken care of first. Everybody's in? Okay. Let's go ahead and take a seat real quick. And what we have before the board is Long Meadow Country Club is requesting to have a managerial change. I believe everybody got the application and we had ample time to look at it, but here's the two people in charge if we have any questions for them.
I move we approve the transfer of liquor license, the transfer of management of liquor license to Long Meadow Country Club.
Second.
Okay, discussion?
Well, I just had some questions in terms of, running an establishment with serve liquor. What's your experience? I wasn't quite sure from the documents.
I've been with the club. I've been in the business for 30 years, and I've been with the club for 12. I started as a manager, and I was the assistant manager.
And now I'm the food and beverage manager. I have tips training and safe serve.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have questions? So you know the questions, we'll call the vote. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you, folks.
Thank you very much.
We're going to have a tax classification hearing starting at exactly 7:10, so we're going to work down the agenda till we hit that point, and then wherever we're at, we're going to stop and go into the hearing. Announcements?
Yeah, a couple, actually. The first is that the leaf collection from Saturday did not get completed. Waste Management will be sending a truck on Tuesday, and then there will be another pickup this coming Saturday. So folks who have their leaf bags out there who expected it to get taken Saturday, they will be around on Tuesday, and then make another pass this coming weekend.
Okay.
And I said a couple, huh?
Yeah, you said you had two.
You can pass.
Yeah, it escapes me at this moment.
Okay. Anybody? Maureen?
I'll take a second one. The Long Meadow Cultural Council is having their second annual local artist spotlight this Thursday, the 19th, 6:30, 8:30 at the library. Last year was a great event. This year, the artist that they'll be highlighting will be Donald Munson from here in Long Meadow, and musical performances by Peter and Abby Thompson. It was really a wonderful time last year. Try to come this year. It's going to be lots of fun, and it supports the Long Meadow Cultural Council. The event is free, though they do have a raffle, and if you win the raffle, you get one of the beautiful paintings. Thank you.
Well, if I can, I'd like to congratulate two young men from the Long Meadow High School cross-country team who qualified for the state tournament. Alex Perkins and Nicholas Lacusa. Great job.
Any relation?
You got my legs, so.
So while we're on the subject of cross-country, the Long Meadow Cross Country Mile, the last race of the series, is December 5th. We've had 3 races. The most recent was this past weekend. And there's the Black Ribbon Challenge for anybody who improves their time over 2 races. And then there's an additional Black Ribbon Challenge for the last race, which it goes to anybody who can beat the race director at 1 mile.
All right. Folks, there is some more seats up in there if anybody'd like to move on in and sit down. There's 2 or 3 seats in the back there. Any other comments? Or announcements, excuse me? Resident comments? Name and address?
Stephanie Jasmine, 123 Englewood Road.
Thank you.
For the past 15 years, Massachusetts schools have been phasing in full-day kindergarten for all children. Last year, 92% of kindergarten children in Massachusetts attended a full-day program, and 85% of them were not charged tuition. As it currently stands, Longmeadow is the only town left in western Massachusetts that continues to charge for kindergarten. The standard in kindergarten education has been set by the state to include a full-day program. The fade-out effect where half-day kindergarten students were thought to naturally catch up to their peers by third grade no longer exists. Dating back as far as 2005, a report published by MIT stated that for every dollar spent on early education, $13 would be saved on future costs. Based on this formula, over $400,000 in future costs would have been saved last year alone if a full day's programming had been provided to every kindergarten child in Longmeadow. As I stated in a letter addressed to the Select Board last month, continuing to charge tuition for full-day kindergarten has led to a situation in Longmeadow where those children most at risk for academic struggles are many of whom are falling into the half-day program. Last year in Longmeadow, 91% of students attended a full day of kindergarten, and the 9% who attended the half-day, a disproportionately high percentage, 36%, were classified by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education as students with disabilities, students with high needs, or students categorized as economically disadvantaged. This is in Longmeadow. Also worth noting, the majority of those children most at risk for academic difficulties who attended the full-day program in Longmeadow were charged tuition last year, including 40% of those children classified by DESE as economically disadvantaged. In order to ensure that all children, including those most at risk, receive what is now considered the standard in kindergarten education, it must be provided to all children. And in order to do so, the town and the school must work together in an honest and collaborative way. To expect the Longmeadow School District to fund full-day kindergarten entirely out of their existing budget is not realistic and would come with detrimental effects to the school's existing programs. In fact, there is not a town in Massachusetts or any other state that I am aware of where a school has funded full-day kindergarten without assistance from the town and municipal funds. In Longmeadow, a process has been put into place for the school to present new programming initiatives to the Select Board, and it was done so out of the recognition that new program costs cannot be fully funded out of existing school budgets. Longmeadow Town Manager Stephen Crane made a statement recently to the press where he stated that it would be very difficult to fund full-day kindergarten in a year because the town has other budgetary pressures. These pressures, as I heard at town meeting this month, include multi-million-dollar projects, a new $15 to $20 million DPW, a new $10 million senior center, and even the possibility of a new $80 million middle school. Worth remembering, the cost to fund full-day kindergarten is around $300,000. If the town does not work with the school now to fund full-day kindergarten for next year, both the town and school could be forced to make drastic budgetary cuts when the state mandates both full-day kindergarten and universal preschool, and the town has reached its tax levy limit following the DPW project alone. The most widely supported bill currently circulating in the state Senate and House of Reps calls for mandating both full-day kindergarten and universal preschool. Now is the time to fund full-day kindergarten. Waiting even another year will hurt all students, all taxpayers, and it will place all budgets at great risk in future years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have any other resident comments?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we've got about 2 minutes, or
Sure.
3 minutes.
I'm going to leave a statement in the record, if I have it here. Eric Bascom from 59 Converse Street. I just wanted to let you know that I strongly oppose the funding of full-day kindergarten, and I also oppose the federal Common Core mandate required by the federal government that is sending down to states. And I've been working on a $3,000 signature so far ballot to take Common Core off of the to put it on the ballot for Massachusetts for this next year. It's for everybody to vote on. It would be a non-binding question as part of the Citizens to End Common Core. And $300,000 is a lot of money that the town could be spending. Have they considered looking at the Longmeadow Excellence Leaf Foundation program, something using private money to pay for the kindergarten? Have they considered to understand what about the high school? I mean, how are we going to pay for the new high school? Are there any plans to pay for this new high school? I mean, you're using a lot of tax money, and a lot of taxes are going up. Is there any plan for the future? Again, I'm going to have this letter I proposed to the school committee be put in the record. Marie-Angela Leadus, I did send you an email last week for you to put my responding comments into the correspondence section of for a later program. Again, thank you very much.
Okay. Did you state your address?
Yes, 59 Converse Street.
Okay, I didn't catch it.
I am Eric Bascom IV. I'm not to be confused with my father, or this information is not to be conflicted with anybody else. I'm my own Massachusetts citizen just proposing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to hold off on resident comments and go for a motion to start our tax classification hearing.
Move to start the
So
hearing.
move. Is there a second? It's a second. All in favor? Okay, we have our expert here to give us a presentation tonight.
Thank you. I just want to get set up for a
Just the
PowerPoint
lights.
presentation.
Just the lights? Okay. Is every,
It's not going to be that good.
I guess maybe we're going to have to move. There's a lot of people need to see this in there. Tom, we might both have to move. All right.
It's in there. It's in the correspondence.
made a copy of it.
Yeah, we got it in.
Thank you.
I would like to give a PowerPoint presentation this evening, a little bit different than the prior years. I think most everyone in the room is familiar with the process of classification. I just thought it might be interesting for some of the viewers, my wife at home. And the other thing is, I think there are a lot of misconceptions about classification and how we get here. So even though this is not the most exciting topic, I'd like to just go through these slides and maybe enlighten a few people, or at least give them the material to ask questions or to have a better understanding of what the assessors do in cooperation with the select board and the finance director, who's sitting right here with me. All right, so what I'd like to go over, you can read as well as I can, why we're here this evening for classification. I presented a separate report to the select board and my assessors. There's a difference between what's called a triennial certification by the Department of Revenue and the in-between years, the interim updates. I'd like to briefly go over new growth, what the new taxable value is in town, the process of doing the tax levy calculation, and also the tax rate calculation, and then finally get to the reason we're here this evening is for classification considerations, whether we, meaning the select board, will choose a single tax rate or a split rate. And then summarize what we did. And then for the selectmen, I did add some supplemental data, which we probably don't need to get into, but it's available if we have any questions. All right, tonight's presentation, just an overview. Explain the process of arriving at a tax rate and show the options that are available. Just as a refresher, last year, the calculation of a single tax rate was $23.76. At last year's meeting, a motion was made and the select board voted a 10% shift, which resulted in two tax rates. The $23 for residential and the $26 for the commercial, industrial, personal property parcels. This year, the calculation of a single rate is $24.33. The tax levy we're all talking about raising revenue. The levy is the revenue a community raises through property taxes when it sets the tax rate. This accounts for about 70% of the total. The tax rate must annually be approved by the Department of Revenue. Before they'll approve a tax rate, by law, each community must decide if all classes of property will share equally in raising taxes according to their assessed value, or if one class will pay a higher tax rate, the so-called split rate, and consequently pay a greater share of the levy. The budget starts off with estimating the amount of money needed to run the town. This is a joint effort between the chief financial officer, town manager, select board, and then it's approved by the voters at town meeting. The classification this evening can change the share of the levy to be borne by each class. It cannot change the levy amount. And I think this is, I've heard, I believe this is a misconception because I've heard people ask questions about raising more money through having a split tax rate. The total levy and any increase year to year is regulated, or some say restricted, by Proposition 2.5. Just as an aside, this first year of Proposition 2.5 was 1982. And some people may think that it was a good idea 35 years ago, maybe not such a good idea today. I'll leave that to you to decide. This is just a screenshot of the classification report that was presented to the, emailed, sent to the select board. And it basically discusses in a little bit more detail, a little bit differently than we're going over tonight. The assessor, the part that the assessors plays is the assessors will inspect property and make changes for additions or any changes to the property and estimate a value. That's our role here this evening. Prior to 2005, a lot of towns would keep the same assessed value over a 3-year period, which was called the triennial certification. Since 2005, the state came in and said, due to some large increases in value in certain communities, to sort of ameliorate the shock of a 20-30% increase in value, the state came in and said, you must do it every year. We'll review it, but then we'll still go through our audit process every 3rd year. Last year, fiscal 15 was the last year of this triennial certification. However, in order to get to tonight's meeting, in order for the Department of Revenue to allow us to have this meeting, they had to approve the sales of property that were used in the analysis. These sales were from calendar 2014. Then they approved the fiscal 16 values, the new assessments, and they approved the growth that is allowed to be added to the tax levy. Let me just take a moment and say, if the select board has any questions or if I'm going too fast, just let me know. I tend to get a little bit caught up in the presentation because I don't do this very often. In fact, when I learned PowerPoint, I was hired in 1996. When I learned PowerPoint, it was just called Point. All right, it's a little.
You're definitely not going too fast.
And in summary, so to get to the new growth is, it adds to the allowable levy that can be raised. And for Long Meadow, years ago, back in the 90s, we adopted a provision that allows us to look at any changes, additions, deletions, houses being taken down, up through June 30th of 2015, and we look at those properties, whatever's there, and we value it as if it was there January 1st of 2015 for this fiscal year, fiscal 16. Now, fiscal 16 started July 1st of this year and goes through next June 30th. Now, the residential property, we had a new growth of $7 million, which translates to about $168,000 in taxes. Commercial, we had no new growth. Industrial, no new growth. And just as an aside, the industrial property in town, by definition, any real estate that's owned by a utility is classified as industrial property. And that is really the only industrial property we have. We don't have an industrial park. Sorry to say. Yes, sir.
We have NA, what does that mean? I mean, I know what NA means, but what?
Well, there was no new growth, so it's not appropriate to cite a number.
Okay.
I could have put 0. Personal property growth is mostly from the utilities, Eversource, Western Mass Electric, Bay State Gas, those utilities that report growth, and that was just about $2 million for another $60,000 in taxes. So all in all, the growth that we can add to our tax levy is $228,000. This is just me getting caught up in doing a graph. It shows that the property values increased less than 0.5%. The tax levy increased close to 3%. And you can see the detail there. We could spend a little bit of time on that, but I think we'll move right along. How is the tax levy calculated? The tax levy starts with last year's levy limit. We add 2.5% of that levy limit. We add the new growth, and we get the new 2016 levy limit. This is the amount of money that the town can raise in property taxes. What we can add to that is the debt exclusion. The debt exclusion plus the levy limit gives us the maximum allowable amount of money that we can raise in property taxes. The amount that is going to be raised is slightly less than that by direction of the select board and the town manager and the chief financial officer. And correct me if that's not correct.
Just, Paul, because does that include the money appropriated, raised and appropriate at the special fall town meeting?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Okay.
So as you can see, the difference between what we're allowed to collect or raise in revenue on the levy and what has been chosen to be the tax levy that has been chosen leaves us with an excess levy capacity. And there's usually an excess even if it's just for a matter of rounding. I think this, I know this was a 2-cent difference between what we could possibly raise and what we are raising. This is the very simplistic tax rate calculation. The town votes to spend $47 million. The Board of Assessors, through their procedures, estimates the total taxable value of the community at $1.9 billion. Take out the calculator, we divide it, and we get a mill rate. We express it in dollars per thousand, and you get a single tax rate of $24.33 to be raised in fiscal 16. As in comparison, last year we had two tax rates, one 23.62 and the 26.13. Okay, this next slide basically just goes back in history and shows that last year the tax rate went up 47 cents for residential and $2.98 for commercial, 2% and 13% respectively. This year, if the select board decides on a single tax rate, the single rate would be 71 cents higher for residential than last year, but it would be $1.80 less for the commercial industrial properties, or 7%. If the select board decides on a 10% shift, and I did this just because they had it last year, they can go anywhere from 1% to 50%. But if they were to stay with a 10% shift, the residential rate would go up 57 cents instead of 71 cents, and the commercial rate would go up 63 cents. Yes, sir.
No, why? I guess I'm questioning how that number comes about.
Well, I'm basing it on the fiscal 15 rate for residential of 2362. And if you go to a 10% shift to 2419,
Yep.
you essentially save like
Okay.
14 cents if you do a 10%
All right.
shift.
All right, thank you. Okay.
Um,
Okay.
I have some handouts if
No.
anybody's interested. It you know, take you, I actually had this chart wrong when I sent the presentation to the select board, and then I checked it over a couple of times, and I'm pretty sure it's correct, but if, you know, certainly not infallible. That's my right-hand man here. This is really just to show, in my mind, that the only way the tax bill goes up is with an increase in the levy. Because people come into my office and they say, why is the tax rate so high? The tax rate doesn't matter. Everything matters, but if the levy goes up, the tax rate has to take that into account depending on how the total value for the community goes up. So this shows that if there's a, let's see, if the total value went up 10%, the rate would go down, but the bill would be the same. And then if there was a 10% decrease in total property value, the rate would go up past what it's allowed by law, but the bill would be the same. The only way the bill goes up is by an increase in the levy. So it's not what people think, that the assessors set a tax rate to raise more money for the town. I just wanted to dispel that because I do hear that a lot in my office. So the classification considerations for this evening is the select board can choose to set a residential factor of 1, which provides a proportionate single tax rate for all classes. The select board can decide to adopt 2 tax rates. They can shift anywhere from 1% to 50%. And as I said before, last year there was a 10% shift, which resulted in these 2 rates. And this also shows what the single rate would have been last year, if anybody besides me is interested. So here again is just a summary. With a single rate, residential goes up 71 cents, commercial goes down $1.80 in the rate. If there's a 10% shift, residential goes up 57 cents, commercial goes up 63. And this is just, you want to pass this over? That was just a year-to-year. I've kept track since 1996 of the changes. And what happens is the tax levy and the values don't stay in sync. So, you know, the tax rate is always shifting. But that was more for the select board to take a look at if they were interested. So the single tax rate, which allows all property owners to pay the same share, their proportionate share of the levy, is $24.33. And then I have a couple of examples. If there's a 1% shift, 2%, 3%, 5%, 10%, the 10% shift saves the average residential property $45 for the year. And that same 10% shift puts an additional $5,000 burden on the commercial property values. And then I had it broken out into more detail, which is not really necessary to go over. I gave a link to a report that was done in 2014 by the Department of Revenue that has a lot of background information, so you can just write this down real quick. And then I had something about how every year behind the values that change, there are things like this. We had, what does this say? This says we had 2 properties that went from taxable, single family. One was taken by the town, and another one was exempt from property taxes, but because it was purchased by a tax-exempt entity. And then we had 3 new single-family homes that were built. So there's, 4. One was taken down and replaced. So there's a lot going on in the background. When people say, well, gee, the single-family only went up a certain amount, well, there are more to the dynamics of why the value increases or decreases. There are changes to properties going on all the time. So that's pretty much as I want to get into, and I'll take any questions and be open for discussion.
Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, Bob, thanks a lot for the presentation. A couple of things, because we heard tonight about already some discussions, and we're going to have more about funding, supplemental funding for things like all-day kindergarten and other things. The new tax, the revenue from new taxable entities was $228,300, give or take. So our growth
Yes.
is only provides us less than $230,000 in tax revenue, right?
Well, you have to add to that the 2.5% increase also, though.
Right, okay.
But this is in
Right.
addition to the 2.5%.
But you know, one could argue that if your budget was going up 2.5% from existing, and you're looking for additional revenue to do new initiatives, that new one source of that new revenue would be from growth.
Correct.
And in this case, because the town is fully built out, much of that growth is people putting additions on their houses. It's not new houses going up for the most part in town. So Bob, what we hear a lot is, well, why don't you just raise the value of all the houses in town so we can reduce the property tax rate? Why don't you just raise the value of all the houses in town so we can get out of the Prop 2.5 $25 bind?
I'll do that my last year. I'm here because it's illegal. But just for you, I'll do it my last year.
Well, that's what I wanted to hear you say, because I know the answer, but
Well,
we hear that a lot.
Part of the process of getting here, in one of the slides, the Department of Revenue has to approve the sales that we use to establish our new values. And all we're doing, there's no magic in the assessor's office. We look at the sales. We had, and I have a folder with this, but we had 3.9% of the single-family homes sell. 215 sales. Out of that 215 sales, we have to then estimate the value of 5,443 single-family homes. So 4% of the sales. And is that a representative sample of the population? Well, we have to presume that it is, because that's all we have. We can't make up sales. We can't fabricate sales. So we take what we have, we check that they are at least arm's length sales, and that they meet the criteria of a market sale by definition by the state, and then we make adjustments to a computer model to show that we're at the assessments are at the same level as what the sales are taking place. And then we also have to show that the dispersion isn't at 100,000 and 6 million. The dispersion has to be within certain parameters. So I mean, there's quite even though this is not a certification year, there's still oversight by the Department of Revenue and probably the Finance Department, who knows.
And what year were those sales that you're looking at from?
2014 calendar year.
So we're really lagging a year, it's the most recent we have a whole year of, but we're really lagging a year and a half, and there's not much, and we've always done that, right?
Well, you have to, because we have to look at what happened historically for January 1st of 15. So we have to look back at, actual data that took place, not projecting.
And actually, that would be a pretty random sample, when you think about it, because, you know, people just put the houses on sale. I mean, it could be a house that's a very expensive house or a less expensive house, and, you know, I mean, some years may be higher than others, but you check every couple of years. So if the prices are going up, you would know about it.
I have statistics from a Warren Publications Banker and Tradesman that shows the median sale prices for the last 30 years. And we've been pretty steady with our values have not increased substantially. I mean, we have individual properties that get renovated that go up considerably in value. We've had a house or two that's been torn down and vacant land that's been built on at a higher value. But it's just trying to reflect what the market is doing, and hopefully it's a representation of everything that's going on in town. You know, if we had 10% of the sales or 30% of the sales, it would be much more of a prediction than an estimation.
Right. And following up at Mark's question then, is there anything you can do to raise everyone's salaries so people would pay more money for houses?
You hear that? I live in town. I'd be happy to move.
All of Western Mass.
I've got one
though,
on
not
Woodsley
just-
that's at 2.9 that I could move into quite easily.
Yeah. I mean, that is the challenge. In the eastern part of the state, they have bidding wars over the properties on a regular basis, but Western Mass doesn't support that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
So, in terms of determining where new growth occurs, how do you get that information?
The building department gives our office a copy of every permit that's issued. And then I follow up with an inspection. Things like a new roof may just be a drive-by, but an addition means going out there and measuring and, you know, knocking on the door, asking to see. We usually have a pretty good idea of an addition. They'll cite certain size addition, we'll measure, and then they'll say add to the second floor plus a bath, so that, you know, they're adding a bath, which typically will enhance the value, and the square footage usually does as well, plus a renovation. We had a couple of properties that were sold very low, and people are going in and they're doing a complete renovation of the property. So it's really, well, that's one of the ways we do it. We also, I happen to have a broker's license, and I have a MLS subscription, and I'll look at the sales, and a lot of times you'll see some renovations that, for one reason or another, didn't go through the building department.
So, getting to the commercial and industrial new growth, you had NA, which you said meant 0. Is that to say that there was no renovation, no permits taken out on commercial or industrial property last year? Correct.
If there was something, I think it was maybe a sign, or it could have been a fit out of a property that you know, didn't do much of a change. I think the CVS is probably going to add whatever the size is, 20,000 square feet at 250, probably $5 million to that property at least.
So, in getting to the commercial property, because you talked about this process of using actual sales data for residential property, what do you, I think I know the answer to this, but I think it's useful for everybody to know. So, for commercial property where there are fewer properties and therefore fewer sales, how do you determine it for commercial and industrial?
Well, let me just back up for a minute. The sales of residential property, single families especially, is used to adjust the cost model for mass appraisal purposes. So same way for the commercial properties, we have a cost model that we have to support with reviewing the income of the property. And a lot of, you know, as you know, a lot of these commercial properties, they'll sign a 5-10-year lease. So that, it's quite often we don't see a dramatic change year to year from some of the commercial properties.
And, okay, so that's kind of different. So you're looking at the income as opposed to sales of similar property.
Yes, even if you, now this is a theory or a preference. Some people would say commercial property, even if you have sales, you should put more emphasis on the potential of that property to generate a net cash flow.
And how do you get the information about the income?
Every year, we send out questionnaires to all of our commercial properties, asking them for income and expense data.
So
And,
the-
you can also, of course, look, in the surrounding communities at what a typical rent would be.
So the information about income is provided by the commercial taxpayers themselves?
Yes, and it's not open to the public.
You have something else, Alex?
No.
Okay. Marie? Tom? Richard doesn't have anything? Paul, could we take your seat in case we've got, is there anybody in the audience that would like to come up
Take my seat.
and address?
I see, please.
We've opened up a seat with a microphone. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, come on up, sir.
You want to stay here, or?
Yeah.
I haven't bitten anyone yet.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'm Charlie Christensen with the East of the River Five-Town Chamber, and I'm here to present the Chamber's position on a split rate tax. Basically, we're here to request that the board consider going back to a single tax rate. The reasons for that is that you have a very small percentage of businesses that are being asked to carry a disproportionate load on the tax increases that you put forth last year. Small businesses have struggled for several years now, and pretty much anything that you put on them is just another burden. Over time, you're going to push small businesses out of the town, which will only add to revenue issues. The more vibrant business community that you have, the more these businesses will contribute to, your overall community, donations to sports, education, seniors, different programs you have in town. As these businesses leave, so go their donations and their participation in the community. Based on the numbers that I was shown, you're somewhere around 5%, in the business, commercial real estate. And the numbers that I've heard traditionally is that split rate taxes begin to make sense somewhere around 15 to 20% in that model. And with only 5%, your businesses are just getting hit pretty hard. The businesses as a whole use very little resources as compared to a residential in terms of schools, fire, police. They're much lighter users in that generally in that area. The surrounding towns, all four of the towns that other towns that we represent, the east of the river, just so everybody knows, is Longmeadow, East Longmeadow, Wilbraham, Hamden, and Ludlow. 5 towns with very similar demographics, a lot of small businesses. All 4 towns remain at a single tax rate. And what's going to start happening is your businesses are going to start to leave. And if you do, and you go back and you look over statistically the numbers, you will find that as the tax burden goes up, the number of businesses in your town will go down. We understand the need for revenue and places to get it, but we do believe that especially in this situation, the business community may not be the best place to get it. I appreciate the numbers and the PowerPoint that you put forward. It was very, very helpful. I hope people understand what you go through. And we hope that you'll consider our request. And thank you again for the time.
Thank you, Charlie. Oh, yeah, excuse me.
Excuse-
He's
just-
got a question for
Yeah,
you.
just one question.
I'm sorry, Tom.
Because, well, you mentioned the 4 other communities, and
Yeah.
and I recently seen something that East Long Meadow had changed to just one set rate.
That's been single tax rate right along. And they've
Okay.
chosen not to
So
go to
all-
a split rate.
So the other 4 communities have a single tax rate?
Yes, they do. Ludlow went to one for 1 year and then went back.
Okay,
That was a number of years ago.
okay. Oh, I had heard East Long Meadow, because there's a lot of industry in there. But-
Yeah, we are getting up towards that 18% mark, I believe.
Mhm.
And the selectmen have made a conscious decision not to increase taxes on our business population, largely because we have a couple of very large employers who, could leave at will.
Right.
We've got is it Cardamundi now? Hasbro, and we don't want to push them out, and Lennox, or Rubbermaid, among others.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Have your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Jack Dombeck. I'm here with my wife Cindy. We live at 93 Windward Road, and we own Peach Wave across the street here. So I'm going to probably echo quite a few of the things that Mr. Christensen had talked about, but really I thought he summed it up very well, and that the whole premise here, I think, is wrong. When you're talking about a 10% shift, and the only effect to the average to a home is $45, that's a cup of coffee a month for all the homeowners. Whether you're on a fixed income or otherwise, I'm quite sure, I would think most people could afford $45 a month. You're talking about taxing a lot of people, a very small amount, or a much larger tax to a much smaller group of people. The cost of doing business in this town is very, very expensive, beyond the taxes. I mean, our electrical rate, a small store like my wife's is $1,600 a month, and that went up, I think, 25% last year. The minimum wage has gone up $1 per year over the next 3 years, and now if you have, I think, over 11 employees, you have to pay sick time for people that call in sick. We employ all high school kids. They get sick. So you pay them when they're out, you pay somebody else to come in their place. You put this type of a tax on a small business, we can't just raise prices. People will go elsewhere, as Mr. Christensen said, because these other towns don't have to necessarily charge the same as we would, or maybe the Rinaldis or someone else. We don't want to drive businesses out of here. We live here. We're paying taxes ourselves personally. I think that's another point I would like to bring up. A lot of the small businesses are citizens in town here. So we do pay. And now we're getting penalized. They're not penalized, but now we're being asked to pay much more, for the business we have. He also brought up a good point about supporting the different initiatives in town and the schools and things like that. We're hit on a daily basis. And I shouldn't say it's not hit. We happily support these people because they're also our customers. But something's got to give, and these are large increases to these small businesses. I would ask that we would keep it at a single tax rate, and not make it prohibitive for the businesses.
Thank you, James. Anybody have a question?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a question, Mr. Tombeck. The lease that you're speaking about, is that what's generally known as a triple net lease?
Ours is a triple net lease.
So that increases in cost of running that property are passed along?
Sure, whether it's insurance, taxes, upkeep of the property, the plowing.
If
Winter was a
the
little
plowing
tough
rate
last year.
went down 20%, would you get a reduction in your rent?
I'm not sure. Steve Walker is here. Okay.
So you, if your taxes go down 6%, will you have a reduction in your rent?
We would.
Yes.
We would, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Rinaldi, 77 Ridge Road. I'm here representing Rinaldi's Realty, which owns the CVS Rinaldi's lot on Route 5. Tonight we'd like to ask that the town return to the single tax rate system that served us very well over the last several years. The split tax rate system that was implemented at this hearing last year has placed an undue burden on the local businesses that we do have in this town. Many of the owners of these local businesses are residents themselves, and through the triple net lease that Mr. Gold just brought up, that most tenants are under, all these increases on the properties get passed on to those tenants directly. The costs have been rising in this town. We just went through them in the last presentations. We've got paying sick work for anyone over 11 employees, which is most businesses here. We've got the minimum wage that will continue to rise until it reaches $11 an hour, and just generally everything is rising. Business has been tough recently, so we would like to ask that you don't place any additional unneeded burden on the businesses that we do have in town. I'm glad to hear that the East River Commerce Chamber brought up that this advertising issue. I mean, when you raise the taxes, the money's got to come from somewhere, and it's probably going to come from that money that's going to advertising. We have the senior class plays coming up next week. I bet if you look in the playbill, it's going to have less local business advertising than last year because of this tax rates. From the assessor's presentation, we're seeing that it would be a 13-cent reduction per $1,000 assessed value if you go to a split tax rate. So you're saving maybe a cup of coffee a month, but you're costing businesses real thousands of dollars. I'm glad that the triple net leases were brought up, because any change in the cost structure in the insurance, the taxes, or the common area maintenance fees gets directly passed down to the tenants on a percentage basis of how much they hold of the building. That's how most leases in this town are set up. It's very common in the industry. And if anyone has any questions about that, I'd be happy to speak to it. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for Joseph? Go ahead, Alex.
So the lease, I understand the point about the lease, but I assume this is a choice by the commercial property owner. I mean, the government's not telling you to do that.
No,
right?
but
I mean, the town of Long Meadow's not telling you to do a triple net lease.
No, but you'll find that throughout the industry, it's almost standard, especially with the property types that we have here, like the shops, like Rinaldi's, and like the one over by Enfield. For the setup that you have, it's almost industry standard that you have whatever percentage that the tenant has of the building, be it 10%, 20%. You take the insurance, the taxes, and the CAMs, which make up those three N's for triple net, and you give them their percentage of those fees. So if they went down 10%, if they went up 10%, that's what they're billed.
But I guess my comment is then, nobody in the government is imposing that.
No.
I mean, that's a choice by the industry, and I understand it's standard,
Mhm.
but, I mean, the government's not doing that. To set the overtime and minimum wage, that is something the government's doing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mr. Rinaldi, I understand that I don't understand, but I observed that last year there was a temporary vacancy in the shops that you were representing here when Webster Bank moved out. And it seems that a store did move in.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the question is, the argument that would say we're going to be unable or very difficult to rent spaces. In fact, this store moved from another location in Longmeadow, is my understanding. So how do we square that with the fact that we're being told, the tax burden was so high, nobody's going to move into town, and yet we have a property moved, and I don't know why they moved within town, maybe location or whatever, but the property did not go vacant for long periods of time. I don't know even if Webster Bank was paying you in the interim, but how do I square that observation with what we're told?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. So yeah, so we did have a vacancy. Webster Bank did leave, and the space was vacant for over a half a year, over 6 months. So we did definitely have. Renting spaces isn't easy. that the Kate Gray, the tenant that did move in, moved from within Long Meadow, so she was already used to paying the higher tax rate, and whether she stayed at her current location or moved to where she did, she would have had to pay that because, like I said, the Grapevine Plaza is on that, whatever their percentage is of the cost of the building, that's what they pay. But to answer your question, we do find in conversations with potential tenants that they can go to East Long Meadow and get a much lower or a lower rate, and that does come into factor because not only do we have to tell the tenants Long Meadow has a high tax rate, we also say you're not only paying a high tax rate, you're paying a disproportionately higher tax rate than the residents are because of this 10% split that was implemented last year, and as was brought up, we only have that 5% of businesses. So even though we were able to lease the space, it was absolutely a factor.
Anybody else have a question? Thank you, Joseph.
And I'd just like to add, I'm glad to see that the room is full tonight. You'll remember at last year's tax classification hearing, it was just Twin Hills and me. So, and then the following meeting after the vote, you had this showing. So I think that says something. Thank you very much, everyone.
Anyone else like to address the board?
Good evening. My name is John Porzik. I'm here on behalf of Applewood Professional Park Limited Partnership, which owns the Long Meadow Professional Park at 167 Dwight Road. I don't think I need to belabor the point. I think all the prior speakers have hit the highlights of all these things. But I just wanted to point out that there is a very real impact for commercial property owners with this split tax scheme. We're talking about saving $45 a month for the average residential property owner with the split tax scheme as it was implemented last year. That's roughly $17,000 a year for the property that my company owns. So it's a very substantial change if you choose to adopt the split tax scheme again for this year. And I would urge you not to.
Okay. Any questions? Go ahead.
So are you're, I assume, then urging us to reduce the taxes by 6% rather than even keep where we are and slightly raise a proportion, or have everybody share a proportional increase in the taxes as the town's cost of doing business and services increases FY16 over FY15?
I don't think I would ever tell you to not reduce our tax burden, but I'm advocating that you go back to the single tax scheme, the single flat tax rate across the board for all types of property owners.
But just to be certain, what Mr. Leclerc showed is that a single tax rate actually reduces taxes for property by 6.9%.
Mark, that's because last year they went up 13%.
Yeah.
But it will reduce them by 6.9%, correct? And raise taxes on single property owners by 3.01%. That was the numbers you showed, right?
If I'm understanding correctly, it will go back to more what was in line with what the scheme was before the split was implemented last year.
I'm not sure what that means, but I appreciate that comment. I don't know what that means.
Anybody else? Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to address the board?
Hi, my name is Michael Levitt. I live at 40 Barbara Lane. Also one of the owners of Kidley Wings here in town. I just want to quickly reiterate a couple of things. An 11% increase in minimum wage, 30% increase in health insurance, 20% increase in other insurances we've had to experience. The increase in just the difference of the split rate would be a 2 or 3 weeks salary for one of my employees. So you're telling me I should either not pay people or cut back their time. This is a town that's enjoyed small businesses of all types over the years. And unfortunately, over the years, we've seen our numbers dwindle. But you're asking us to take an unfair burden. Those of us who live in town and work and own businesses here in town. The other difference is, I'd like to clarify, the triple net rent, as Mark asked earlier, If the snow plowing costs go down, does your rent go down? The answer is no. The rent stays the same. What goes down is the cost of the shared expenses. So we still sit with a base rent every month. And the triple net, in addition to the taxes and the cleaning, the maintenance fees, insurances, today's commercial leases rent you the space, period, the four walls. Your HVAC unit goes out, the tenant replaces it. It's not replacing an air conditioning unit for your house. It's tens of thousands of dollars to replace a rooftop unit, which we've had to do. We have 3. And we're dealing with older properties requiring more and more maintenance. You do work and we used to have old Federal Pacific circuit breakers. Can't do them anymore. They weren't safe. We've had to put new circuit breakers into our stores. The landlord does not pay for that. We have to absorb that expense. And the property in town is old. The tenants have to absorb that difference. With all these other expenses, I can only ask that we go back to the single rate tax plan. Thank you.
I understand this Federal Pacific's obsolete now.
I'm sorry?
Federal Pacific, I don't even think you can buy their circuit breakers anymore. Aren't they
can't.
obsolete?
No,
Totally.
I know a few people who have a few, but you cannot
Yeah, they got them in their basement.
Yeah.
Back of the
Yeah.
trunk of the car, you can get some.
Yeah, well, if you got a Federal Pacific panel, you're gonna be replacing it. Thank you, sir. Yeah, anybody have a question? Any more? Okay, I just had a comment on the Federal Pacific breakers, that's all. Yes, sir.
Bobby Barquette, 35 Plymouth Road, the owner of the kitchen right over here in Long Meadow at one of our little plazas. I don't know if there's any new information I can give other than requesting that the select board go back to the single tax rate. One thing in particular with regards to all the discussion about costs increasing, they're real numbers. I employ 21 people. I obviously am classified to have to pay in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts sick time. After the 90-day waiting period, I've now had to pay 3 employees for legitimately being sick, to the tune of about $22 an hour. That's for the replacement of the employee who was ill, plus the person who had to be ill, for example. If you look at the increase in minimum wage, that'll equate to roughly $800 a month increase for me to the business. I don't know that we can increase our prices here in Long Meadow and then enjoy a good business with people coming in and paying nearly double to cover all the costs associated with doing business here. So I urge the select board to go back to the single tax rate and give some relief here as opposed to the $3.80 that we might relieve all residents. Thank you.
Bobby, nice. You really thought you were going to get out? I just have a quick question. You and I worked together for a long, long time. We know each other pretty well, and I know some of the other people who've spoken as well. And I guess my concern is that what I'm hearing is the list of what it costs to do business as a small business owner, what it costs to do business in not just the town of Long Meadow, but the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and maybe the United States with minimum wages and insurance and sick leave and all that kind of stuff. And I guess the question is, where does the town, say, well, it's our obligation, or we ought to, or we can't have the opportunity to, and therefore we need to compensate for all these other things that are going on that make it very, very difficult, and I understand that, to run a private small business. Everything from, a lease structure, which is, pretty difficult to begin with. You folks just paved your parking area, or not, I don't know if just, but, somebody got assessed there for paving that parking area to minimum wage and sick wage. How do we, how does somebody in this say, well, the town will take one for the team because the Commonwealth is raising, the cost of doing business through sick leave and all that other stuff?
I think simply don't split the tax rate. Don't split the tax rate. Leave it to a factor of 1, and we still have to bear the burden of increased cost in supplies, petroleum, whichever. I mean, we're enjoying a very low gas prices right now. I mean, everybody's enjoying that. That's not going to last forever. Okay? We've had increases by the Commonwealth for the sick time. That's a lot of money. The question is, do you have to bear the burden? No, but you also don't have to split the tax rate. An unnecessary burden is to set us differently from the other towns. East Longmeadow, Ludlow, Wilbraham, Hamden, single tax rate. But we chose last year to split it, to save taxpayers on average $45 a year, $3.80 a month. I'm about to go into $720 to $800 increase per month just for the minimum wage. Forget about covering the sick time, because that's just an increase. You just asked me, I just told you. Go back to a single tax rate. That's not an unnecessary burden. Part of doing business is a triple net. Part of doing business is dealing with the Commonwealth with the sick time and the increase in minimum wage. And then I have to bear the burden of that. What I don't have to bear the burden is being a resident and I'm asking the select board to go back to a single tax rate, which is onerous above and beyond other communities.
Thank you. Any other questions for Bob before he escapes? Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
Would anyone else like to address the board? I see no movement. I'll go for a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in
Yeah.
favor? Hearing's closed. Thank you for those of you who participated in the hearing. I guess now we'll move on to a discussion.
I guess.
Marie?
Well, I'd like to see us go back to the single tax rate. I think what we saw was, according to industry standards, you really wait till it's around close to 15 or 18% before we consider the split rate. And I think it did have a real impact on our businesses in town. I know, Mark, you mentioned that one did go into a place and they were able to rent it, but there was a 6-month delay in that. That's a real loss to the business. And then we did lose a business in town. And if we do see other businesses lost, those are jobs. And those are jobs most likely held by Longmeadow kids.
Were you placing a motion?
Oh, I didn't, I know that Mark doesn't like to go right into the motion, so
Okay.
I thought, do you want me to go right into a motion, then discussion?
Makes it easier for discussion, then we
Okay.
have something we're actually discussing.
All right, so I move for that we have setting a factor of 1, providing a uniform single tax rate for all classes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, so back to my
No,
discussion.
we're
Yeah,
discussing.
okay. So I think, so we saw a loss of jobs. I think the other thing they talked about is decrease in contributions in town, and that good relationship between the organizations and the businesses, I think, are really important. And what we will find, I think when it was first discussed, we talked about CVS and all these big companies, but these are our town people, and these are businesses which, as we have a mobile society, won't hesitate. East Longmeadow's not that far away. The prices keep going up. People will go. We will see a loss of businesses and jobs. And I just don't see how we're really gaining too much, because it's the same amount of revenue we're raising, and we're not really offering that big of a tax break to the residents. Last year, it was $45, I think they said, for the year. Now, I know, Mark, you pointed out there's going to be a cut in one and an increase in the other. I think we have to, that was the mistake I think we made last year. We'll have to balance it out this year. So that's why I support the single rate.
Thomas.
I'll say, yeah, I think that part of what we're talking about here is pretty important to me, because when I go out, I usually look for a family business. I tend to avoid chains. In the building I have an office in, we have a great lawyer just right upstairs. But I would prefer a local person running their business than having some large national law company having a satellite office in our town. That just doesn't do it for me. I had an individual who I went to as a private practitioner, family practice, the best doctor I really ever had in my life. And he was in practice about 5 years in town, and he had to close down. And it was really disappointing, because that's the kind of business that I'd like to see in our town. People who want to live here and have their own business. Some of the other things that came up in the discussion is really about looking at the, all the surrounding towns have one rate, which I think is kind of substantial. I do know that a lot of people I talk to who are small business owners think very strongly about moving over to East Long Meadow. They say, well, there's really not that much difference, but it's a lot less expensive to do business there. And I really do appreciate having places in town. We look at a small business like our local hardware store. People depend on that store. It's so easy to just get something quick, and if we lost that, it would be a big detriment to the community. We look at a place like Twin Hills, how many functions have we all gone there, for school events, and if you were gonna have a wedding in town, if we didn't have a place like that, you'd have to go over to the river. I guess some people can get into the Long Meadow Country Club, but I'm saying we need to have some resources in this town, and I think it's hard for us to make a decision that's going to be the detriment of local businesses. And let me think, I had something else here. And as far as finding renters, I personally have had to find renters in my small business, and it took a long time to find renters. It isn't easy. You think, oh, everyone's going to make money if they move to Long Meadow. Obviously, people don't think that. We are lucky to get people to move in here, and but I don't think it's an easy thing, and so that's why I'm supporting a single rate, and I just think it makes us a stronger community, and I know I'm probably not the only person who has the dream of living in the community that they have a business in, and I think it's important, and I think for us to have a double burden for a person to be paying, their personal taxes on their home, and then have to pay a different rate, a higher rate on their business, when it's only 4% of our business, of our property. I agree. I don't think it's we need to continue to have two rates.
Alex?
So, if our vote today, if we voted for a single rate and we could guarantee the hardware store, I'd be all for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all know the hardware store, whether it comes or goes, isn't going to depend on what we vote here today. In fact, I think the cost of occupying commercial space in this town, just like it is everywhere, depends on market forces. And so I have trouble drawing a connection between things that have happened with businesses in this town during the last year or last several years and the tax rate classification. As many of the people said, a lot of the issues facing small businesses or large businesses. And getting back to the hardware store, I think the hardware store is dependent on what's happening to large businesses and corporate decisions that are being made in their interests. So I have trouble sort of drawing that one-to-one comparison, and quite frankly, I think in terms of the burden, this class rate tax classification, if it goes up 2.41% next year, I think I'd be hard-pressed to say that it had any particular effect. One of the reasons that I voted for the tax rate, split tax rate last year was that over the years, and we've discussed this repeatedly on the select board, that there are certain anomalies in how commercial and residential property is valued. I think you've heard Mr. Leclerc indicate that there's a different methodology, necessarily so. And some of these anomalies suggest to me, anyway, that the residential tax rate is a little artificially high, and the commercial rate is a little artificially low, and how how the value is assessed. To me, the split tax rate goes some distance toward address those anomalies. And then I guess the final thing I would say is that in terms of the communities, I don't just look at the 4 communities here. We live in a big world, and when I was doing the research last year, what I found was there are many communities that have a much larger split. Boston, it's a huge discrepancy between commercial and residential. And again, I don't think anybody in Boston has ever tried to make the argument that any particular business changes have are resulted from that tax classification. So, our modest split rate, is not unusual by any means in Massachusetts. I'm not going to be voting for the single rate.
Mark?
I support what Alex said. I've been on the board, this will be my 7th tax classification hearing, and in all 7, or at least the 6 previous ones, I voted for a split rate because I believe that in fact we need to provide tax rate relief to our residents. And Tom, I'm interested. I listened to what you just had to say, and I appreciate your comments, but I go back to a couple of the other things you said that, when you were campaigning and you talked to people, the number one thing they talked about was taxes and tax rates. And people saying, it's only $50, it's only $50. $50 means a lot to a lot of people in this town. A lot of people who have no way to offset that $50 by raising the price of their goods and services they provide by a fraction of a penny, or whatever it takes to make up this cost differential. And again, we're not talking about anything more for the coming year than raising the rates of the property tax value rate of by 2.41% on everybody. We're now saying everybody, property and commercial, should get a 2.41% tax increase. This idea of, a make-up tax rate, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. If we don't like what we did last year, that's past last year, but to make it up at this point by reducing taxes and putting an extra burden on residents, to me, is unfair to the residents. And it's interesting that we've got a whole lot of businesses represented here and no residents. I mean, I haven't heard the Long Meadow shops canceling their expansion plans because the tax rate's too high. I haven't seen that businesses aren't full because the tax rates are too high. There really is a large, as Alex said, a larger force at work than a 2.41% increase in a percentage of your cost of doing business. Again, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about 2.4% on properties that are owned by residents and properties that are owned by commercial owners. The alternative would be raise properties by not 2.4%, but by over 3%, and reduce commercial properties. I'm really going to be interested to find out if, because it sounds like the votes are here anyway, to pass this 1.0 tax classification. If everybody's property taxes and everybody's costs of doing business really do get passed on by the Grove properties and by the owners of these businesses, because that's the proof in the pudding is it going down the line. Again, I'm going to vote against the motion as it stands. I've been consistent, and I think our residents deserve the property tax relief.
Any other comments? No secondary comment? Guess that leaves me. I voted against the action that took place last year, primarily because it was never justified to me. I asked several times why, and I never got an actual reason that I could put my arms around and identify with. We are a 4% community. We want a 4% community. We've asked for a 4% community. Every time we have a town vote, it's reinforced that we want no growth in our community. We want 4% business. We don't want to increase business. So we have limited our growth to a 4%, and now we want to turn around and start penalizing that 4%. And sometimes it doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand it. Above and beyond that, I usually take time and do a little bit of research. I look around the Commonwealth. I was interested in, I don't know if it was Bobby or somebody else. No, it was a gentleman from the Chamber of Commerce. Started talking about the rates across the Commonwealth. That seemingly it's about the 15% portion, 15% residential or commercial business where you start seeing the split rate come in. I did some quick checking today, and pretty well on. I didn't go all the way up to 15%, but there's these may be dated figures from last year before, but the database showed there was about 110 towns in the Commonwealth that have a split rate. Out of, guess what, 351 communities in the Commonwealth? 352, 351. So that's about a third. And then I thought was particularly interesting. I just read down the list, and there's only 14 of those towns that have a split rate that are below 10% business. I didn't go down the database, but I think he's right. You get 15 to 20 to 30% commercial is when you see the split rate most predominantly fold in. Matter of fact, the 1% there's 0, the 2% there's 3, the 3% there's 0, and the 4% there's only 2 towns in the Commonwealth that have a split rate of 4%. Only 1 at 5%, 3 at 6%, 0 at 7%, 1 at 8%, and it goes on up to 10, a total of 14. So it's not that popular of an alternative. As was brought up by some of the business people in this room and by the Chamber of Commerce, that there has to be a reason, a very, very compound, dedicated reason why you shift a tax rate. And I know it's nice to wrap your arms in the flag when it's election time and saying I'm doing this for this, that, and the other. But I like common sense to prevail that lasts from year to year to year. I like to look back and say there's a history to what we've done. I spent today looking at 50 years worth of records in our community, reading town reports and election reports and what was on the election. It's amazing if you go back 50 years and see what the transition in our community has been and watched it grow. It's amazing where we are today in comparison to where we were 40 years ago. So I've yet to see a reason why we did this. I like money too, but I fail to see the reason that supports the shift in our tax rate. And I've not heard anybody tonight, again, tell me why I should support a split tax rate in our community at this point. So obviously, I'm going to support going back to the old rate. I know Mr. Gold had said, basically, you're going to penalize people. And I basically turned to Mr. Gold and said, well, why did you do this last year? There wasn't a reason for it. Why did we do it? Each individual in this town can figure out the reasons on why something was done. I have my personal feelings on why things were done, but it's my personal feelings. I personally voted against it. Because as I said, I couldn't wrap my arms around why we were doing it. I still can't. I don't understand it. Maybe in the next couple of years, somebody will be able to get it across to me, so I understand this process more. Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, I just answer your question, Richard, why we did it. It's to provide tax relief to residents, period. That's why I voted for it.
Right, but as I say, it wasn't prompted. It was a spontaneous, prompted thing. Let's save this particular year.
As I said, I've proposed this for the last 6 years.
Okay.
And Bobby Barquette was on the board with me. I voted against the single rate because I spoke for a split rate. We can go. So you asked why. I can tell you why I did it. I can't tell you why anybody else did it.
Okay.
But you asked the question. That's the answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Also, I'd like to share, as the business is brought up, and it kind of leaves us a little quietly, we have the highest tax rate in the Commonwealth. The highest tax rate in the Commonwealth. Now, the other argument says, well, in Boston they pay more and this, that, and the other, and that is true. But we have overall the highest tax rate. So that's what we're fighting against, is we're starting with the highest and trying to somehow make it so it's not the highest, and it doesn't matter, folks. It's still the highest. And it's going to be the highest tomorrow, and it'll be the highest next year. You saw the figures here tonight. $23 and what, 80-some cents, Paul? For the rate?
24.33.
Yeah.
That's my
433.
Yeah. We know there's a magic figure of 25. It's coming. I don't know why we can't admit it's coming. I don't know how we're trying to prevent it, but the Grim Reaper is there unless we can get massive growth coming in this community. We haven't seen any fantastic things take place this year, and every time we try to do expansion in our community, we are told, no, we're not going to expand. So it's inevitable, the handwriting basically is on the wall. Sooner or later, our tax rate is going to peak out.
But Richard, and what you just said is absolutely true, but it's not important to the discussion on a split tax rate. I mean, I agree with you. We've got a highest tax rate in the Commonwealth, but that's a quotient. It's the amount you gotta raise divided by the value of your property. You know, if our properties were located in Newton or Wellesley, you know, our tax rate would be half because our properties would be twice as much. They're not. You and I can't change that. I mean, and we are coming against that $25 limit of Prop 2.5, and we're gonna address it one way or the other. I mean, but a split tax rate has absolutely nothing to do with resolving the issue of coming up against our tax levy limit.
True.
And so, you know, that's a separate discussion on how do we get growth and how do we, you know, and how do we do something to alleviate or reduce the overall tax rate. That's a very, very different discussion than a split tax rate tonight.
Stephen, normally there wouldn't, I guess I can allow you to speak, but you normally wouldn't speak to try to influence the board.
Yeah.
Well, just from a planning and economic development standpoint, just to offer a slightly different perspective, but go ahead.
Well, that's sort of different, as Mark said, that's sort of off the vote.
Mhm.
Should we have the vote and then discuss development?
Are we through discussing? Any further discussion on the board? Okay, seeing no further discussion, all in favor of, and the motion, once again, Marie, was,
Setting a residential factor of 1, providing a uniform single tax rate for all classes.
okay. All in favor? All opposed?
I mean, I think the only thing I wanted to point out in the discussion is because to some extent, I think good points have been made on both sides, and I agree with a little bit or more of what everybody has said, because you're right, individual business decisions don't rise and fall on necessarily exclusively the tax rate. I guess the part that I'm looking at it from is the assessed value component of our tax rate. And it's truly, Mark, a non-quantifiable thing, but one of the things I believe enhances the quality of life in the town, which sustains our purchase prices and our sales, is the quality of the retail and commercial development that we have. And I don't know if a split tax rate would mean the end of the quality of commercial we have, but I think that the case could be made that it doesn't help. But again, the case could be made that the residents may not see the benefits of the back of single tax rate as well. But I think it's a little more complex than I think this is kind of black and white discussion. I just wanted to point out the assessed value. We don't talk about enhancing our assessed values very much. We talk about the tax rate side and the expenditure side, and we need to. But the planning effort the long-range planning effort that we're working on, the survey, is going to have kind of both sides of the equation. How would you want to see enhanced, greater assessed value, not just on your own home, but community-wide? So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you, Richard.
okay, thank you, Stephen. Okay, folks, our hearing's over and our vote's been taken. Appreciate everybody showing up tonight.
Don't throw them out. They might
And I'm not
wanna-
throwing them out. I want to let them know,
Last call. Last call.
Mr. Chairman, may I be recognized for a brief resident comment?
No, it's out of order. I object. I object. It's out of order.
Well,
But
isn't
you
it-
can do what you want
Isn't
to,
it
but-
actually time, we didn't go through.
Not on the,
resident
not
comment.
as a part of the tax cost hearing, sure, but just to re-enter resident comment.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you. But may I speak?
Yes, you may.
About what we, during the debate, I just wanted to remind everyone that last year, at the tax classification hearing, the original motion was a 50% shift. So I just wanted to keep everyone in mind that, Mr. Gold, you mentioned that you've been consistent, but I just want to remind everyone that last year, the initial motion was a 50% shift.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Judge. We've got consent agenda items. We've got a couple of, sign requests, Stephen?
I move the consent agenda.
Okay,
Second.
consent agenda in a second. Okay, any discussion on consent agenda?
Can't.
Discussion. It's consent agenda.
That's right, no discussion. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Give me a break.
Well, that's the whole reason you put it in consent agenda.
Okay, town, let's see, select board comments.
Richard, wait a second, I didn't get the consent thing.
Oh, we have to sign it?
Okay.
Right, the consent agenda was.
Consent agenda, yeah, approved.
I made the motion, Marie seconded it.
And he wouldn't let me have discussion.
And it was 4, everyone voted for
And
it.
I know that you're right. The consent agenda is for no adjustment.
And we have to sign it?
We have to sign everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we're in select board comments. Alex?
So, this week, I emailed you, Richard, about when we were gonna have a vote on the DPW site.
Right.
And you indicated that we wouldn't have a vote and that it would come before the board as a proposed warrant article in the spring. And so it kind of raised for me the question, so it's pretty clear from the last town meeting that the site of the DPW has not been decided yet. Obviously, it's going to be decided between now and when the proposed warrant article comes about. And I'm unclear who's going to decide whether or not we're going to be taking field space from the Wolf Swamp Fields. Now, you can deny us a vote, you can deny our, the people's democratically elected representatives a vote on that, which I think is a mistake, because you control the agenda as the chair. But I think, people in town are very interested in this question. And to the extent that the decision maker, whoever it is amenable to resident input, they ought to know who's going to making that decision. If it's Stephen, then people in town ought to know, all right, the select board's not making this very political, very sort of nuanced public decision. Go see Stephen. If it's you and Stephen, tell us. You and Stephen that's going to be making that decision. Like I said, to me, I think what ought to happen is that we ought to have a hearing, or we ought to have a meeting. This ought to be on the agenda, and people know that it's happening. We get public input so that we understand what the impact of taking field space at Wolf Swamp Fields would be, and what it would really mean to a whole lot of people. There's a lot of sports associations that depend on that space. I can tell you, if I don't know who's going to make the decision on Wolf Swamp Fields, there are 15,900 people who don't know who's going to make that decision. And quite frankly, we have not engaged the public at all on this question, and this whole thing is a surprise to probably 90% plus that Wolf Swamp Fields are in danger. So, like I said, my preference would be for us to take a vote on it, but if you're going to deny us that, tell us who's going to make the decision, and residents go see that person.
Okay. It would have been good. No, let me address Mr. Grant. It would have been good if you read the email I sent you. I thought I pretty well gave it out succinct. There's been 3 votes on the DPW complex so far. 2 warrant articles have gone to town meeting and been voted on by the legislative body. There's been no secrets. We have a 15-person committee
I guess, yeah.
that we formed, and we also went to the town meeting and said we're going to go out and get an engineering firm that's going to come in. They're going to do a site selection analysis. The board has been briefed. They've been given information on this as we've gone along. They came back, I believe there was 10 or 11 sites that were evaluated, and they took it down to 3 or 4 or 5, whatever it was, and it went to the committee, and the committee ended up, and by the way, it's 15 people. So it's not Alex and the town manager running the committee. I can assure you on that. There's 15 very individualized people on this committee. The 2 sites that came up, number 1 and 2, was the Wolf Swamp Fields, and the number 2 was the Glen Meadows complex, and there was 2 or 3 more. There was 2 or 3 more behind it, but they were the top sites. We went to the town meeting. In the presentation the town manager made, he mentioned that the Wolf Swamp Fields was the number 1 consideration at this point when we asked for additional funding at this meeting. He also mentioned that Grand Meadows was a secondary site. He said they were going to be doing as I mentioned to you, we're going to do the background and see if the Wolf Swamp Fields are even legally available. Now, that's the first question that must be answered. Can they legally be made available? And that's what we're in the process now, is finding out. It's conservation land, it's also park land. They're going to take legislative action. And we need to make sure, can that even take place before we can even come back and say, okay, now the final recommendation that'll come to the board for a warrant article and will go to town meeting for a vote is Wolf Swamp Fields. And no one will be denied anything in this process. I mean,
who's going to make the recommendation?
The recommendation is coming from, we went to the town meeting, we said the number 1 recommendation is the Wolf Swamp Fields, and we said the number 2 is the tennis complex. And as I mentioned in the email, what we're doing now, we're doing the soils work at both locations.
Who's the we?
Stephen and I, since you
Okay.
wanted to team us together.
Well, but, okay, so.
Okay.
So there, right now, we don't have a recommendation. There will be a recommendation.
No, there is a recommendation. The number one recommendation that was made at the town meeting was Wolf Swamp Fields. That was the number one recommendation from our committee and from the engineering firm that we hired to do site analysis work in our community. When they had the matrix, were there 15, 20 items that were evaluated?
Maybe just go into a little bit of detail there, sorry, Murray. Just go into a little bit of detail.
Yeah.
Because Mark was a part of a previous task force, and I remember the last time we talked about this, you made the comment that essentially the same two sites came out of your process in 2008.
But with a reverse
With a
recommendation.
reverse order, with a reverse recommendation. And I think what happens is we take the site, there aren't a lot of places to put this. I think I've made this comment at town meeting. And so the filters are size of the parcel, access, topography, things like that. And that's why these two sites, depending on the order you look at them in, came across 6 years hence the same way they did in 2008, because there just aren't a lot of parcels that fit a facility of this size, and we've determined that it can't go where it is today. So there are kind of specific questions that I know would come up in a discussion about the two sites. What's the difference in development costs? What could the layout be? And these are in part engineering questions. And the engineering work that needs to answer them is now proceeding now that we've received an endorsement from town meeting. I think if it's Grand Meadows, obviously the site would have to be purchased, and that's a select board decision. So ultimately, if Grand Meadows turns out to be the best option,
That'd be a town meeting decision.
Select board,
Town meeting's gonna have to authorize.
the funding,
Right.
correct. But the vote to actually acquire
Right.
the private site would be a select board vote.
Right.
But there's information that we're going to want in hand before I'd at least want to have available to you before I'd ask you to make a decision like that. And so now we're in the process of gathering that. So I think it's, how did we end up with the two sites the same way they ended up with them the same in 2008, which is there's so few places you can fit this site reasonably. So right now it's geotechnical testing to test the condition of the soils, where is groundwater, basic engineering questions. And then there's certainly some cost analysis we're going to want to do on the difference between, there's obviously no acquisition cost on Wolf Swamp, but there is a field replacement cost that we will have. That'll obviously be information that the Conservation Commission is going to want to know before we go to them to change the use from recreational to municipal. On the flip side, on Grand Meadows, there's going to be a cost to acquire and a cost to relocate the business, and then demolition and all that other stuff. These are all the things we're now in the process of identifying. So, ultimately, Richard's point is correct. The ultimate decider are the people when they decide to vote to fund the project or not.
So if they like the DPW idea, but they don't want Wolf Swamp, they're gonna have to vote against the project to save Wolf Swamp.
I think they will have, obviously, as we move forward and gather information, part of our process is field replication. We know that's important. So the goal is to have have no loss of field space. That is a project goal. Once Wolf Swamp emerged to the fore, based on the feedback from the task force, we knew field replication was going to be a priority. That's a part of what we're working on. The other alternative is, because there really are these only two viable sites that have been, like I said, affirmed by two different task forces, we'll then look at, okay, so if we don't want to, the cost of not doing it Wolf Swamp will be X, which will be the acquisition and relocation costs of the private site, which, we showed it fits at both sites, but one, Wolf Swamp is the preferred site based on really all things being equal analysis, understanding that we do gain a much better parking and traffic setup there than we have today, but you may lose some field space. And I want to make sure the public is clear, it's maybe 1 or 1.5 fields, it's not the entire complex that's being considered. So I appreciate your concern.
I guess
there'll be
my
other
question is, when do sports associations get to weigh in? Because they weren't even aware of it.
Mhm.
So is it when they have to go vote to fund it or not?
Well,
apparently so.
The task force includes a member of the Parks and Rec Board specifically for that reason. And so the Parks and Rec Board member who's on there speaks for himself, but really is the one who's supposed to be the kind of representative of those interests of the sports leagues and the Parks and Rec Board, and he's done an excellent job standing firm on the importance of the field replication in our task force meetings. So I think the decision we made at some level by the select board, either through an acquisition decision or a warrant article decision, and then ultimately town meeting, but in terms of the decision of what to recommend, that decision will be a recommendation that comes from the task force, which would be me, Richard,
It'll
several
be the task
members.
force.
Yeah, it'd be the task force will make a
Yeah.
recommendation.
I mean, the task force speaks for itself. There's 15 people. Each person has a vote. Yeah, I know. I was coming to the town manager still at the floor. You all done? Okay, Marie?
Just building off what Alex said, I know we've talked about that before, that there was 38 slides. Be nice if they went up on the website so that people can start, seeing the project, talking about it a little bit more. Maybe even a show on LCTV where you talk where we are in the project and get information out there. And of course, people can send their comments to you anytime to the task force.
Yeah, if people want
Yeah.
to know where we are and what the thought process is, certainly call me. I mean, I have all the information in my office, and
It would be nice to be on the website, yeah.
Or call in a member of the task force. Go ahead, Mark.
I guess, why aren't we having a public forum about the site? I mean, we've kind of prided ourselves that we have public forums on everything, and just to get the public's input. And yes, we have a 15-member task force, but we have perhaps, other people in town who want to weigh in, and I don't see any.
How many public forums did you have with the building committee for the schools?
Tons.
No, I mean, talking about the schools themselves. I mean,
I went to 4 or 5.
What was the nature of them?
We had Marie, you were, we had consultants come in, we had all kinds of
Okay,
discussions.
But that was
on-
what, public information, right?
It was both public information and
Well,
gathering public input.
We're not at that point yet.
Well, I gotta tell you, Richard, if we have public forums and 99.9% of the people in town feel one way, this is also a political decision. It's not that, I mean, I'm a scientist, the numbers all say this way, but in decisions in town, if the people wanna go that way, and it costs them an extra X number of
Okay.
dollars, we do it.
Okay, we got a public forum right here, and I'm gonna tell you, public, tonight, we got 2 sites, and we don't know which one is buildable. And public forum, that's all the information we have at this point.
But you don't wanna hear people's
We
opinions?
went to town meeting. Why do you wanna hear something before you have anything to give out to people?
Because people, when there's only 2 choices left, and it sounds like there's only 2, although I've heard people say, figure a way to build it where it still is, but when you only have 2 choices, it may be that all the technical analysis in the world doesn't hold a candle to the political will of the citizens.
Well, then the political will of the citizens is they turn the project down.
But
It's not gonna change the outcome, Mark.
But it will make it at least less efficient. I think that's what Alex is going to. Why to go through all the thing that says, we've decided we're going this route, and let everybody say, no, now you gotta switch and go. Why don't you up front get people's opinion? I mean, this is, we're avoidance of a public
No,
input.
don't say avoidance. That indicates we're doing something that's wrong. We're not doing anything that's wrong. We've been to town meetings twice. We've made presentations twice. This select board's been briefed on.
But we have not had a public forum.
Okay,
That's period.
okay, that is public forums too. The town meeting's just as public as you can ever get. Have we walked in a room and said we're gonna talk about the site tonight? No.
You see, and I disagree, because the town meeting
You
was a
disagree
chance
with
for,
me?
yeah, because the town meeting is a chance to debate an article, as opposed to have people say, what is your opinion of a site for the DPW? What is your opinion of a new DPW at all? That broader discussion can take place in a forum, whereas a warrant article is very restrictive to, you for the money, you against the money.
This
Not-
was identified in 1988. You know the reason we don't have this complex is because of what we're witnessing right here at this table at this very moment. Since 1988, this debate has taken place. And we've not been able to move forward because we have found more reasons to kill a project than we have for it to move forward. There is going to be plenty of time for public forums. Believe me, Stephen has a plan of, Marie, I'll get with you in just a minute. He has a plan for public disclosure. There is a whole plan being developed for taking this to the public. Why would you want to go to the public with half-baked information at this point? Because I've already told you, you go spread the fears to the land that we're going to steal Wolf Swamp Fields. That's not true. Do the simple soil test, do the simple legal test to see if it's even feasible to use the land. And now it's time to find out the temperament of the public. Because now we're not spreading rumors, we're spreading the absolute facts. We're saying this is available, and here's what we can do for field replication, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You give them the entire package. That's what we've been trying to do. That's what the task force has been trying to do. There's been no way of keeping this hidden. It's been brought before this board many times, and you know it has. It's been talked about freely and openly. Can we do more? I guess we're going to have to, but believe me, there's no intent to hide anything on this program.
I characterize, Richard, and this is not intended to attack you or anybody else. There is a perception by some that there's a railroad train going down the track that says Wolf Swamp Road's on it, and we don't want anybody else's opinion. We don't want to hear any objections. And my intent is to get those comments, and we may hear overwhelming support for Wolf Swamp Road, but we may hear viable comments against it. And, you know, we've been talking internally so long, and I've been doing it for 6 years, that I have no clue what the people really want to hear, and I'd like to hear from others beside our small little group. I tell you, I support, and I strongly support a new DPW and have for a long time. You know, that's why I held my nose, held my breath, and voted for that, you know, and voted to continue moving forward with this project. But in fact, you know, at this point, I'm starting to think that we've got a railroad track going.
You held your nose and voted in support?
Yeah,
and that
because
says you support it?
Yeah,
I think
because
you got
the
some
process,
phraseologies mixed together there.
The problem is the process
Yeah.
stinks, Richard. The process is starting to stink.
Okay, now, first of all, this is Select Board comments. He's recommending a public forum. I don't think it's time for us to argue when we're gonna have a public forum, if we're gonna have a public forum. You guys can talk about that another time. And this whole thing about it being railroaded and it's stinking and you voting for it, you voted against the article at the town meeting.
Right.
So I think there's some issues about public forum on whether that's the issue right now. In Select Board comments, it's not a time for debate. It's not on the agenda. He's made a recommendation of public forums. That's it. That's the end of the Select Board comment. You really can't debate it now because
Thank you,
that's
Marie.
not appropriate for the agenda.
Right.
But I do have a Select Board comment, is that we did tax classification, but don't we have to set the rate? Because one of the things we said in the directive, we weren't going up to the full 2.5. And the only thing my motion was the first part of it was a single tax rate, but we didn't talk about the tax rate. Didn't we have to have 2 votes?
Yes.
Okay. So whenever you want to put
Okay,
that back in the agenda.
we'll finish our
Select Board comments?
Any more select board comments? Not gonna get in on this, Tom?
Well, the only thing I want to see is when they made the recommendations on site selection, it seems it was pretty close, like 62, 65, 67. And it would be interesting to see some of those, how those numbers were derived by the folks involved.
You got the report, you sent it out to everyone, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I did send out the rankings report that Weston Sampson originally did.
Right.
I think, and again, it's, okay. I can wait till town manager report to offer my
Okay, well, in the last comment I'll make, there is more information gonna be coming to the board now that we're past the town meeting. And we've got some other business out of the way because there's more of an accelerated pattern coming in. Any other comments? Okay, we wanna go back and pick up this tax classification item?
So,
I'll move to set a tax rate of $24.33.
Need a second?
is that where it goes up to 2.25?
2.41.
2.41, that's what we were told.
Oh, I thought we were only going up, not the full 2.5%.
That's
2.41.
That's why I was asking you.
But this is for
Okay.
the budget.
Okay.
This was for the
2.5%.
budget approved back in May, right?
I asked Paul Pasturzik if that represented the raise and appropriates at the special fall town meeting, and he said yes.
FY16 expenditures. Right. Yeah, yeah, not FY17 budget that we're looking ahead at.
We're looking at these, we're supposed to be setting the tax rate.
You're not talking about FY17, you're talking about FY6, the current tax year we're in.
No, I was talking about
The current year we're in,
Yes.
we have to set the tax rate for.
this year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what this whole tax classification's about. The current
But
year
you're
we're
always
in.
telling me we can't change things, we have to do that in the fall.
But
So if we're going up the full 2.5,
We're-
and
we're-
that's what the discussion I had with you.
Yeah.
So, what are we voting on?
I think it was the single tax rate based
For
on,
fiscal
based on the
year
formula that was
2016.
presented at 2.41 for FY16.
So it's going up
To
for FY
2433.
16. So what goes up on
Yeah, I see
FY
2433.
17?
Here, it's
I'd have to go back to the presentation, but it's when we do the budget, then you look back at what the projection would be and what the, because
So how do we not go up the full 2.5%?
by submitting a budget that is based on the
The
projections, only goes up.
directives, by
Correct.
the directive, okay.
Yeah.
So that directive we did can hold it.
Just to give you an example, the budget that was approved for FY16 projected a 2.5% increase. But through various things that have happened, including even the raise and appropriates at town meeting, we're still at 2.4.
Okay, all right.
So it's through the budget projections. Now, when we get back here in the tax cuts, other factors get known as we go. But you can set it
You
lower.
seconded it.
You can set lower, okay, good, that was my only question. All right.
Debbie, was there a second on the motion?
No, because I said, well, before I second this, let me make sure we're not blocking that. Okay, so I'll second it.
Okay. Any other discussion on tax rate? See no discussion, all in favor? All opposed? Okay. Where are we?
Manager's
Town,
report.
Richard,
yeah.
since we have people who are gonna present,
Mhm.
I think we could do that item.
Yeah, I was just gonna do that, Alex.
Yeah, I can defer.
Yeah, I was just gonna do that, because we'll let Janet and them come up before it gets too late. So, we're going to have the school presentation next, Janet? And Marie Doyle, I guess both of you are going to do it?
Janet, can I do it? I'm going to be here for support.
You're the,
She is my electronic wing man.
you're the backup?
As long as they don't talk to you about it. Right. That's right.
You need,
For a copy machine.
yeah.
You need- not to mention stapling.
Oh, it's on here.
Oh, it's on there? Okay.
It's the one with the can lights. I think it's the last switch. If you just get the can lights on.
Those on.
Yeah, and then the one's up, yeah.
Okay. All right, so I'm Janet Robinson, 57 Canterbury Lane. I am chair of the school committee. And here tonight on behalf of the school committee to speak to the issue of free full-day kindergarten, which I know that you've had town members speak both for and against. The school committee did unanimously approve my being here this evening and endorsing, unanimously endorses free full-day kindergarten. So, since this issue had been raised 2 years ago, what I did to begin with is do a comparison of the number of districts that offered kindergarten 2 years ago versus the number of districts today, giving just some statistical information that shows that the number of districts within the state of Massachusetts have increased in who is offering full day only versus those who had previously been offering half day. 2 years ago, half day kindergarten only was in 20 districts. This last year, only in 5 districts. 2 years ago, 73 districts charged tuition for full day kindergarten. There are still 72 who are charging, with the average tuition rate increasing slightly, about $56 over the last 2 years. So in 2014-15, which is the last year that we have data for, 98% of students, or 98% of the districts and charter schools offered at least one full-day kindergarten classroom. And of those, 243 of them offered it district-wide, and 65 offered partial full-day and partial half-day like we do offer here in Longmeadow. There are only 5 districts within the state that do not offer full-day kindergarten, and those are listed there for you. And only 8% of Massachusetts kindergartners are now enrolled in half-day kindergarten. So you can see our population has decreased statewide in the number of kindergartners enrolled. However, the percentages enrolled in full day have increased. And since FY 2000, the percentage of children who attend full day kindergarten grew from 29% to 92%. And those are numbers from last year. Just wanted to present 2 different maps, one that we used 2 years ago to talk about the number of districts who charged for full-day kindergarten, which are highlighted in those colors, and the ranges of tuition that they did charge. And then the next slide shows the most recent data with those numbers decreasing of the number of districts that charge tuition, and it also is the number of districts that the tuitions are decreasing, so that there is a sizable difference in both of those. Now, we often we can't always compare ourselves to our neighbor school districts. What we tend to do when we look at test scores and graduation rates and such, we look at our like districts, which are determined by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And our like districts take into account districts of similar size, socioeconomic status, free and reduced lunch, special needs. We put all of that together. And so some of our like districts, over the last 2 years have changed. But in looking at those, they do, this past year, they offer full-day kindergarten, most of them at a tuition. There have been some increases in tuition, but there have also been districts who have gone tuition-free for their full-day program. So this is just a comparison. I thought since we're comparing everything from 2 years ago to today, that out of fairness, this was only fair to present this data as well. So research has compared half-day and full-day kindergarten, and it does suggest that students do benefit because they're more prepared for school. They do better with their transition to first grade in socialization, stronger learning skills. They have better attendance. They can show bigger gains in literacy and language measures. They have enhanced social, emotional, and behavior development, and they have reduced retention and remediation. And according to the National Association of Education of Young Children, children in full-day kindergarten do show greater reading and math gains than those who are in half-day programs. You can see long-term educational gains, again, the social, emotional development and benefit, as well as the intellectual. And most 5-year-olds are ready for a longer school day because they have been in programs previously, whether it be preschool or some type of daycare situation. And being there for a full day allows them to better learn and explore activities more in depth than if they were in a half-day program. The National Association of School Psychologists also has advantages for full-day kindergarten, which does allow for more time spent on individualized instruction. They get more time to engage in free play, which play is a very important part of age-appropriate and developmental education at this grade level, which our teachers in Longmeadow have greatly pointed out to us, both in our discussions 2 years ago. It allows for social behaviors to be reinforced in a more positive way. And it allows for a more relaxed and less hurried school day, allowing them to go more in-depth, allow them to be creative, allow them to have a more variety of experiences. And from some of our teachers here in town, they have stated that full-day kindergarten offers more opportunities that are developmentally appropriate, which does include hands-on, does include play. It allows children to develop critical social skills that they are going to use throughout the rest of their lives. It allows them to participate in social, emotional, and physical activities. And what I thought was key, 2 key points, is it allows them to focus on the whole child, not just academic, but allows the social and the social skills and the emotional that is developmentally appropriate. And it also allows teachers to get to know their students and identify and address their learning challenges because they have more time with each other. Common Core standards are based on the assumption that children are attending full-day kindergarten, and the expectations of students entering first grade have changed significantly over the years. As was mentioned by Ms. Jasmine earlier, in her words to you, there is currently an Act for the Universal Early Education and Full-Day Kindergarten, both in the House and the Senate, which would call for mandatory full-day kindergarten, requiring all children to attend a full-day educational program by age 5. Those are all footnoted there for you, and as she said, it combined the universal pre-K with the mandate for full-day education. At this point, the school committee, full well understanding where we are with the tax levy limit, looking at where finances are, we wish to be proactive and look at starting to address this issue now before legally we are mandated and required to provide it at a time where we may not have the funding to do so. Based on current staffing, based on the current number of sections we offer for kindergarten, and based on the FY15 rates of salary, benefits, everything else, it would cost $374,725 to be able to offer free full-day kindergarten for all students. There would be changes in Chapter 70 funding. The change to free full-day kindergarten would result in an increase in Chapter 70 funding in the year after the change was implemented, since Chapter 70 funding is a year behind. The district would see little or no increase in revenue the year we did adopt the program, if we change from tuition and a half-day to free full-day kindergarten. Based upon the FY16 Chapter 70 Foundation budget, figures provided from Mr. Hatch from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the per student increased amount would be $637. Using the FY16 October 1st official enrollment data, we have 157 students in kindergarten right now. 12 of those are half-day students, 145 of those are full-day. If we use that number for enrollment multiplied by the increased amount of Chapter 70 Foundation budget, that would give us an increase of approximately $100,000, which would be coming in as funding, which could be used to offset the cost of full-day kindergarten. Again, it won't cover the entire amount, but there is an offset in funding at a year delay. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of you have or attempt to.
Mark? Yeah, Janet, thanks a lot. I'm going to start out by just telling you and anybody else that the benefits of all-day kindergarten, I don't think I'm prepared to discuss it all. I take them for what they're stated at, and I believe them. You know, so I think the issue for me is, you know, given what we just went through for the last 2 hours, is, you know, how's the town best afford this? In a town whose A, tax rate is already $24.33, B, where we have no or limited new growth, and all these things that we literally just talked about. And so, you know, I guess my first question is, did the school committee at all think about coming to us with a proposed solution for funding, not just the proposed issue of, you know, can you give us some more, you know, $375,000 more?
Right. The purpose of tonight was to educate everyone within not only the select board, but you obviously have a different audience than the school committee does. So to be able to educate and give information to people within our community about why it's important. We also know, as every year when we start going into budget season, that anything we do, anything we wish to introduce that is new, we try to look for ways to offset within our own budgets. Based on the newest budget directive of being that it would, because it is a new initiative, it would have to be submitted as a new program. We do have plans to do that, but that is not to say that when we are looking within our own budget, that there would be a way to help offset those costs. It's that, but like is stated, to offset $375,000 would be detrimental to complete programs. You know, we can certainly look to help to fund it, but we would need additional funding from the town.
Okay, just another comment. One of the things that you said was, you know, we need to think about doing it now before we're mandated to do it. I'm going to take a different approach, and because it's to my side of this benefit to do that, but if we're mandated to do that, it becomes an unfunded mandate. We can go back to the state for funding, as opposed to if we struggle and do something draconic, you know, less hour, you know, because here's where I'm coming from. Money would have to come out of general revenue and the general government, as well as out of the school. It's going to be shared.
Correct.
And when I look at the general revenue, general government side, you know, we're saying, look, we really don't want to hit public safety. There's police and fire is kind of almost sacrosanct. We're running, you know, so you look at, you know, the DPW, you look at Parks and Rec, and you look at the adult center and library. I mean, we don't have enough pencils in town hall to make the difference. So by cutting that, and I'm saying to myself, maybe we do want to wait until it's mandated so that we get the state, you know.
There won't be any funding. It will be another unfunded mandate from the state.
But, you know, I guess my side is, and this isn't to be argumentative, but the state, you know, auditor has been very, very favorable to towns who have gone. Now, it takes you a while. It takes you a couple of years to go back and chase the money. But they've been very favorable at not. The legislature is definitely not going to appropriate the money. I have no, expectations that that'll happen. My expectation is they'll mandate it without any funding. We go to the state auditor, who then declares it an unfunded mandate, and we go get back money from the state. That's happened in a number of situations, not with mandated kindergarten. And I'm not proposing we delay and delay and delay, but I'm only saying when your back's up against the wall and you really don't have a source of income, that may be a way to do it. And that's kind of just a soapbox as opposed to lots of questions. But my real question for you is, have we looked at hybrid systems from other towns that may have less of a revenue impact on us? I know that I've got a child who lives in Newton, and my grandchildren go to they've got alternating days of full day kind of thing. Have we looked at things beside just across the board full day kindergarten?
Yes. When we did this, when our task force and committee met 2 years ago, we studied all different models. I know there are plenty of districts who go to school Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or they go half days, every other Wednesday, or they have every Tuesday off. And, for working parents, that's rather difficult. I know that was one thing we were looking at. The other is transportation. We are mandated for any child who lives greater than 2 miles, K through 6, to transport. And so looking at alternate schedules, makes, it has a ripple effect of making things a lot more complicated. I wanted to go back to the funding part when you were mentioning the other agencies. I know I had mentioned at our joint meeting when we started talking about budget, the amount of free cash every year. And I certainly am not advocating personally or on behalf of the school committee for use of free cash, which is one-time money for recurrent expenses. However, I did ask at the time, the school department, which is a large percentage of the budget, and we recognize that, we're managing our budget to, I think we turned back about $50,000 this year. And yet turned back money from other departments equaled in excess of $500,000. And my question then, and my question still will be, is if we, with $30-some million, are budgeting tightly enough to only have $50,000 remaining, where is that other money that every year is being budgeted and every year is being turned back? Is that could be a portion of, I'm not saying to fund fully, but that should be something that when we are talking about budget and funding, that I would like to have considered.
If we did that, we wouldn't have that free cash every year, though.
I understand.
I'll give you our CFO's word, which if you can tell me what department it's gonna come from this year, we'll cut their budget, but every year it seems a different department, which is
Right.
part of our.
No, and I understand
problem,
there's
but-
flux and
right,
flow, but
right.
it seems that, every year
No,
there's a lot of ebb and flow.
You're right.
One of the reasons for that is that on the general government side, you cannot really transfer money between functions.
Right.
Like until the end of the year with a select board vote. So if the police department spends to the nickel, but because of attrition or a grant or what have you, another department, finishes, ahead of the pace.
Right.
The money gets turned back because it cannot be transferred but for limited circumstances to another function. Whereas I think in schools, the transferability between functions is
And I do
unlimited, really.
understand that, but when you're talking about 30% of a budget not being able to be transferred and 30% of a budget turns back that amount compared to a much larger portion, I would just hope that we're looking more carefully at that, because those kind of funds just aren't attrition, so.
Yeah, you and I, we talked about that before.
Yes.
That the problem is on some of the DPW work, the major contracts, if one gets held up for a year or something happens, that money flushes again.
Right.
So there is, it's an unfortunate part of the business.
Right.
Where you're a very, very high percentage of personnel services and fixed costs, and you can crank yours in pretty tight every year because you don't have you have discretionary programs when you know what they're going to cost you and they don't vary.
Right.
You suddenly don't go in and say, hey, this year we're not going to do first year, or we're not going to do kindergarten program, for instance, and boom, you got $300,000 flushed.
Right.
No.
No, we don't have lots of extra fluff.
Yeah, there's no free cash line item in anybody's budget. It happens because we budget conservatively. There's not, we don't set aside at the beginning of the budget year.
Right, no, and I
just
wasn't
yet.
meaning to
No,
imply that.
I know you know that, but,
I didn't want to imply that either, so. I think Marie had a question.
Thank you.
This, Marie?
Yes, that Marie.
The question on the $100,000 you're talking about, increase in
the Chapter 70?
Chapter 70. So that wouldn't come in June of 2016. You're saying it would come in June of 2017?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. It's a year behind.
A year behind. Okay.
What is the cost of our kindergarten program right now?
From the general fund or in total?
Well, general and total.
Approximately $400,000.
Right, is because the tuition is offsetting.
Okay, so what is the part of the state's putting in? What's the half-day kindergarten program costing us?
We pay for the entire thing.
Okay, and what does that cost? You know, Marie?
We're not getting any money from the state because we charge tuition.
Even on the half-day?
Correct. And there's only 12 students in the half-day program.
Oh, no, I understand, but the state's not reimbursing you for the half-day commitment?
No.
And if we didn't have the full day, you'd have full reimbursement for half-day kindergarten?
No reimbursement.
I thought they funded the half-day.
No. The half-day is required by the state. We're mandated to provide 400 and,
Richard, we're mixing phrase. They don't fund half-day kindergarten, but attendance at half-day kindergarten is part of the
Right.
Chapter 70
Right, it's part of the
formula.
formula.
so it's 12 students at the $637.
Right.
So $7,000?
Right.
Okay. And the other ones aren't figured into your Chapter 7?
Because it's tuition-based.
Right.
Tuition base, okay. Good, I didn't know that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was not aware of the Lake District thing. That was new information to me, which is interesting because we struggle with that. So we don't. I mean, it's nice that the state kind of gives you your like districts, because when we look at comparative costs of things, it's hard to figure out who are our like communities, and the instinct is to go with people in the Pioneer Valley. But that may not, for a variety of reasons that you pointed out, that may not always be the most applicable comparison. I think I remember when we were talking about OPEB, Mark made the comment that I think there was, at the time, maybe a half a dozen, we'll call it, towns setting aside money for OPEB, and he said we're one of the 6 smartest or 6 dumbest, because either we're ahead of the curve or someone's gonna come along and fix it, and this money we've been setting aside is, end up gonna be held aside for naught. I tend to think that it's the other way. We're ahead of the curve because the money's not coming from, it's gotta come from someplace. But, what are those other towns, if this truly does become an unfunded mandate at the legislature, what are those other towns gonna do? Do they have capacity to just absorb it, or have you been tracking the discussions there?
We've not been tracking discussions, but being like communities, they're very similar to ours with being low, commercial, low industry. So they're either going to their towns, and trying to work something out, or they're going to have to cut programs.
Or, pardon me, they can raise their taxes if they chose to, even above 2.5%, if they chose to, because their property tax rates are in the $14, $16, $18 range, not $24.33.
Potentially. I mean, the reason why I asked the question, it wasn't really a leading question. I mean, I think if this comes down from the state, we won't be the only ones looking
Right.
to make
There
the
will be
adjustment. And it'll certainly call from some creative problem solving, and I'm interested in kind of opening a dialogue with those other communities to find out how they are going
Right.
to. I mean, we're going to do what's right for us,
Right.
but somebody may have good ideas out there.
And I think, it's gone before Wayland, before, I know they had come up 2 years ago, and it was defeated because of that. I'm sorry? Wellesley passed it, Wayland did not, because of the issue of funding and where it was gonna come from, and their collaboration with their town. But that's a good point, Stephen, is to see where they're looking.
Yeah, we have to do what's right for us, but sometimes
Right.
it's good to see how they'll deal with, at least how they're talking about it.
So, go ahead.
I heard that they were going to reconfigure the Chapter 70 money, and which would probably be an increase for this upcoming year. Have you heard anything on whether it's going to come through?
You can come on up.
Yeah.
Because you'll need a microphone.
And actually, what the MMA has been saying, that they were going to reconfigure it because of the cost of healthcare.
The simple answer is maybe.
Okay.
There was foundation budget review that the Committee on Education did back, I want to say back in maybe March or April. They were going through the process. We, as a district, did not decide to ask for a foundation budget review, because what happens is you either end up with more money or you end up with a lot less money. And you don't really want to ask the state to take a look into the amount of money you're getting out of the formula, because, like I said, it either benefits you or it doesn't. And it's a crapshoot. But ultimately, there hasn't really been a solid recommendation out of foundation budget review yet. I don't anticipate, based on everything we're hearing, that it's going to change very much in the way that they're funding the formula. There may be some traction down the road, especially if S-268 and S-253, one of those is just filed in the House, so it's really 2 different bills and then 1 duplicate bill. If they pass, there may be, I know that one of the bills calls for an increase in state aid to help offset it to a certain degree, but, last year we had a $1.2 billion shortfall that we had to close. And while I think municipalities were lucky to see an increase in Chapter 90 and UGGA and in Chapter 70, you can never count on it, given the fiscal environment, because of things like healthcare costs.
So we're not even part of the discussion because we didn't ask for the review.
I don't think that, well, individually, the district did not send a letter, but the committee reviewed the entire foundation budget, which includes us. And we could have, during that process, asked for it, but I think that we chose, probably smartly not to ask for it because, we don't want to see that number go down. The town already gets a very limited number or amount of Chapter 70. And we're not alone in that in the region, even. Hamden Wilbraham, although because the regional gets a little bit different funding, they're very limited as well. East Long Meadow is very limited. So, smaller communities do not get the same type of, or smaller middle class communities do not get the same type of funding that a larger urban city would. It's just, or even a poorer, lower income community would.
Well, going back to that last question I gave Janet, the 100,000 then, no, it's for you. The 100,000 might not come to fruition. I mean, you're talking
based off the current funding formula, that's the anticipated amount we would see an increase in. And that's based off of the foundation budget formula.
Which could change.
Which could change because they're doing a review, but like I said, I don't really see it changing too much.
Okay.
Because it's benefiting the communities that really need it. Every community really needs it. But it's certainly right now benefiting the communities that need the state aid to fund their lunch programs, to fund their transportation, to fund their classrooms. That certainly have a lot more challenges than Long Meadow does when it comes to education. But certainly, my this is my interpretation of it is that you're not going to see a huge change.
Okay.
Tom, you got a follow-up?
Yeah, just in terms of this Chapter 70, if they're going to, have larger reimbursements, especially for special ed and so forth.
Yeah.
Has the committee discussed how much that could figure out in terms of a dollar figure if they were to change the reimbursement rate?
Not yet. Tom is just beginning with Finance Subcommittee to start looking at the budget directive and start calculating those changes.
I think it's also just, as a quick side note, important to remember that Chapter 70 and special education reimbursements are two separate pots of money.
Okay.
Chapter 70 we can basically use for whatever, but we get a reimbursement through circuit breaker on any expenses we incur for special education above a certain amount, and that usually goes to offset the cost of educating the individual student with a placement.
Alex?
So I guess what I want to say is I support this proposal. And I think what you're doing is courageous, and I think what Senator Lesser is doing is courageous because the politics is never going to be favorable. There are always going to be more people who do not have children in kindergarten than do. I mean, it's kind of a moral question in my mind. And the reason why I say that is because, to me, the basic question is full-day kindergarten part of a public school education? Now, back when those of us went to kindergarten, kindergarten was a whole different thing. I mean, it was getting used to lining up and, following directions. I mean, it's a full-day kindergarten is mandatory if you're going to succeed. And so to me, the question is not whether parents in town can afford to pay the tuition. The question is, why don't we charge everybody for public education? I mean, I'm sure there are people in town who could pay every grade, but we don't. Because we've made a moral choice that public education ought to be paid for by everybody. And the reason why we do that is because the benefits go to everybody. I mean, we all, I don't know, actually I'll just speak for myself. I know I got a public education. I also know that my parents couldn't have afforded the kind of tuition, even in the degraded dollars of many years ago. And what I'm concerned about is that we have a two-tiered system. We have based on the ability to pay. It's a separate but equal, hopefully, system. The problem is separate but equal doesn't usually work because it usually turns out to be unequal for the reasons why you were stating. There's no way you can accomplish in a half a day what you're gonna accomplish in a full day. I mean, it's just common sense. Why would we do it? I mean, if it doesn't bring benefits, we shouldn't have anybody go to full day. Nobody in the state should go to full day. The fact is, everybody's doing it. So, and one thing that we should keep in mind is this board has made choices. This is not inevitable. You know, the town manager spoke in the newspaper about what the select board's priorities. The town manager does not speak for me, does not speak for the select board. Only the select board does. And the select board has made choices that put pressure on the budget. OPEB funding keep ticking up, capital keeps ticking up. They're good arguments for it. So we should not think of what we have, the structure we have in place as inevitable. In fact, it's a choice. Just like choosing whether or not to maintain this two-tiered system is a choice. So I think we need to engage with the school committee. We gotta find a way to make this happen. I'm sure we can do it. We have to get to yes. And at the end of the day, we're gonna have $100,000 to offset the cost. To me, this is a real no-brainer. And before I'd like the discussion to be more about what we're going to do for education. I mean, how many times do we have something that pays off 13 to 1? There isn't one thing that we do in town government that does that. Stephanie Jasmine had it right. This is what Senator Lesser's been talking about. And, you know, and again, to me, this is a political question. I say you're courageous. I say Senator Lesser is courageous because this is not a ribbon cutting. This isn't something that everybody's going to get behind. This means taking a stand and doing what you think is right.
Okay.
And I think we ought to do what's right.
It's also not a warrant article at this time, but thank you, Alex. We'll can your speech and we'll bring it back at our actual deliberation, but your points were well taken.
And can I just mention in regard to the two-tiered system, because we worked very hard to make sure that the parents and the students and that the community knows the same curriculum is being presented in the half-day program that is being presented in the full day. The full day allows the time to get into the depth, to get more involved, to do more projects, the hands-on. But it's not that our half-day students are being shortchanged in what they are being presented. You're absolutely right that there's a difference in the amount or in the depth or how far you can go with it. But none of our kindergarten students are being shortchanged in their basic curriculum.
Any other questions? Statements? Janet, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Marie, thank you. Select or all the school committee members, thank you for showing up in support.
Richard, since we're off the rails.
Yeah,
on the
we're gonna
agenda,
bring,
Arlene and
yeah.
Mario.
Yeah, but Arlene, why don't you guys come up and get ready for your presentation? In the meantime, Mark, we're gonna go ahead and do our board appointments.
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot here.
All right. Oh, forget the time to do them.
Yeah, you want a motion?
Yeah.
Well, we can't, we're not gonna, I'm gonna move that we appoint Patrick Carnahan to the tree committee for a 3-year term.
Second.
Second, okay, any discussion on Patrick? All in favor? Aye. And the other one, we're going to hold Jeffrey Klotz because we're trying to get with the school committee and find out how they want to handle the interview, but,
I have a meeting with the IT director on Thursday to kind of get in, because we had talked about kind of forming a joint superintendent town manager task
Okay.
force to review the whole thing.
Debbie, are we going to be in violation now? We have interviewed Mr. Klotz. We have X amount of time to where we,
Interviewed him
last meeting.
I don't think so.
Okay, can you double check that and make sure we're not in trouble? Because, I mean, we really have, Janet, she was hoping to get it done at the last meeting, she couldn't get it done. So maybe we can get to tomorrow on that, okay?
I think, Richard, even if, let me say violation, even if the time lapses,
Mhm.
you can just bring him back.
Okay.
And I think, and like I said, I think and I didn't bring this up when he was here, but the broader question was, is the recommendation that when the superintendent and I get our kind of heads together, or really the IT director, about what's the MOU format?
Right.
Or should we even have an IT committee as it's presently constructed?
Yeah.
So to appoint someone to a committee that we may recommend changing.
Okay.
That's my only point.
Okay, maybe for not. Okay, well, thank you. And now we have Arlene Miller and our Director of Public Works, Mario, is going to give us a presentation on solid waste recycling.
We're going to talk trash?
Yeah, talk trash.
I think presentation is a little bit.
I think if I can just give a brief introduction. One of the reasons why I asked them to come here was, I mean, we have the holiday waste, holiday trash amnesty on here, but then, you know, we had Market Raised had requested a report about the vehicle or the fuel surcharge under our new contract, and it is a new agreement that we are 3 months or so into, and we wanted to kind of just get caught up on the 4 months into, get caught up on the performance of that and how we feel like that's going, and then, you know, I think we just received our rebate. Is it fair to call it a rebate from the MRF?
It's not a rebate, it's revenue.
That's revenue.
It's actually
They paid us for our recyclable materials, and what I learned and what I was reminded of is that the town's solid waste recycling program yields, really on a comparative basis, a very high amount of revenue compared to other communities, and especially on a per capita basis. And I thought that's something that we should talk about with just for your sake, but also for the community's sake, because we do very well, and we don't spend a lot of time crowing about our program, but it is very, very good. So that's why I wanted to have them here to kind of give us that kind of update.
So I'll just start by saying, Stephen asked me, wanted somebody from the MRF, the Springfield MRF, to come here and present you with your check for the revenue, and I said, I don't think they do that, but I'm the closest thing you'll get because I work for DEP and I do tours at the MRF, so I'm going to sit here and pretend, be in my DEP hat for you. And Stephen, I was wrong in my conversation earlier. Let me see, what we have, yeah, Arlene was wrong, good. When we got our check, they sent around data about how many tons and how much money all the towns in Western Mass produced for the 6-month period. The check is always 6 months late, so it's January to July through June of 2015. But we do have the biggest check in all of Western Mass, and the reason is we have the most tonnage of the dual stream communities. So we have, when I say that, do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. We don't have a single stream program, we have a dual stream program. Sometimes we're criticized for not having single. Our check is the largest in all of Western Mass because the single stream communities, as Mario can attest, being from Springfield, are getting no revenue because the cost to process single stream material is so expensive. They're not getting any revenue. The dual stream communities are getting revenue, and since our tonnage is the highest among the dual stream communities, we've got the highest check in all of Western Massachusetts. And it's not extraordinary because the markets are down, so don't get too excited. Don't go spending all your money on this. But it does reflect we recycled 918 tons in that 6-month period, and as my math genius to my left will tell us.
If I can add a little bit to that, and I know it's only 17,000, the bigger number is the cost avoidance. When you take 900 and some odd tons out of the waste stream, and it's not one for one, you're saving $50 some odd thousand that you would have spent paying to have it disposed of. So that's the real savings right there for not just Longmeadow, for anybody who can embrace their recycling program and do it well.
Right, and our program is somewhat unique in that it's a pay-as-you-throw program. The tax base pays for the full one barrel or bag of trash, 35 gallons or 40 pounds a week, and any excess trash, people have to buy a blue Longmeadow tag to put that excess trash in. And that little bit of incentive is what drives our program to be the successful. It's just people recognize they can recycle all they want, so they can live within that 35 gallon, 40 pound a week program. It's fair, it works, and it drives the recycling numbers up. So kudos to the board for supporting that kind of a waste reduction program. Towns around the Commonwealth that have it, you can pick the towns out when you look at these numbers who have that kind of a program because their numbers are better than other communities. So I think we can be very proud as a community. Our residents can be proud. We can do better.
Sure.
We're working to do better.
Yes.
And that's just the message. So thank you for your support.
So how much is the check for?
It's only for $17,785 because this reflects the minimum payment, which is $15.67 a ton, But then we're allowed to get into a revenue share, which at some points in the last 5 years, it's been up to $40 a ton that we were getting because the markets were so high. But now the markets are low, and we may be getting $16 or $17 a ton, but it's not extraordinary. And it's going to be less next year because we're in a new contract. But we still will be getting money. The single-stream communities probably will not unless the market's raised to a particular level, and then they bump into the revenue share.
So, Arlene, you were saying that we are criticized for not being single stream?
I've been criticized for being criticized.
Well, I'm trying to understand how, given that we're separating, seems like separating's good, right? I mean, why, what's
I'll take that one.
You
And
can
I'm going to speak from my previous employment. The driver is that the cost avoidance piece of it. The more capacity you can give them, the less work that the resident has to do to separate it into two different streams.
That's the theory.
Right.
Debate.
The more avoidance you'll have, which will reduce the amount of your tip fee. That seems to be the trend in waste management now.
So we could save more money than we get in the check, theoretically.
Theoretically.
Okay.
We're going to debate that another day.
Right. I'm just trying to answer your question.
I just wanted to understand. To me, like, it seems like the ultimate in recycling is, you know, like I remember back in the day, you know, green glass, clear glass. I mean, like you can really
remember that part.
You know, you can really, you know,
sort.
One of my good friends is in Germany. You know, like they demand a lot out of people in recycling. I don't know. To me, that seemed more environmentally friendly. You know.
Well, what really drives our program, and which is much better than even single stream, is the pay-as-you-throw part. That's what really drives, because of that, the waste, we reduce.
Lack of capacity.
We've said lack of capacity for trash, unlimited capacity for recycling, and you can put out more trash, but you pay for that extra bag.
Right.
No question, universally, that drives more than anything, the recycling. Single stream communities that don't have the political courage to do what you've done, and that is support the pay-as-you-throw program, feel that the single stream kicks it up, but it's got other problems as well. So,
right,
won't go there.
I had a question. I know you said that check isn't as much because the market's not there, but have we been increasing the recycling in town, or do you see people falling off?
It's hard to, you know, I'd like to say yes, we've been increasing it, but recycling is based on weight. And many of the commodity, look what's happening in the market. People are buying less newspapers. They're going online to get their news, so there's less weight in the newspapers. There's more plastic and less glass. That's lighter weight material. So we may be having the portion of our waste stream being removed might be greater, but that's not the number I'm looking at. You're asking me, has the 900 gone up from 800? And it maybe hasn't, but that doesn't necessarily mean our recycling isn't a percentage better. And I don't, since I'm not allowed to go into people's trash, which I would love to do, I don't know exactly, you know, that proportion.
You realize this is being recorded.
That's it. I don't do it.
Arlene, there are also communities that are making a trend to collect garbage waste, like food waste, separately, and that again would reduce our total
significantly.
Mass. Significantly. And they have, in some places they have the bags they use compostable bags. Is that something that we could ever lean through? I compost my own in my yard for my garden, but is that something that we ever could see in the horizon?
Sure. The state a year ago, October 2014, put in an organics ban for large producers of food waste. And by doing that, it'll start to drive facilities that can handle food waste. We don't happen to have someplace in our backyard in the southern part of the Pioneer Valley that is economically feasible to take our food waste right now.
Okay.
Will it come? I think absolutely it's going to come. What the model will be, I hope in my lifetime, is every other week trash, every week recycling, every week organic waste. Because we're not going to have that much trash.
I think it was a year or so ago, we saw a presentation from Covanta
Yes.
that they were contemplating building, or they were in the process of building one down in the Bristol area.
Anaerobic digester.
Anaerobic digester.
You know what? They've gotten out of that project. I talked to somebody last week about it.
Oh, they got out of it then.
Interesting. But that's all right. There is one in Hadley at Barstow's Farm, if any of you know. It's an anaerobic digester that the state helped fund. It's coming. The infrastructure is slowly building, but it's not here yet.
They're working on some of the older problems and animal control. There's a few things they have to work through before it's viable.
Definitely.
Those
Animal
kind of
control.
things. But I think it'll happen. The industry's changing. I think Long Meadow's followed that. They've responded significantly. We participated in a regional solid waste disposal contract, which was very financially beneficial to the town, but that was all because the industry's changing. We capitalized on that. The vehicles that we're using with waste management are going to be more energy efficient. They're going to be able to. They split the trucks now that they can split the trucks with the garbage and the recycling. And in Long Meadow, he said, what was the split?
60/40, I believe.
I think it was either 60/40 or even 35, whatever the other numbers. But we have so much recycling that he said that we've never had a truck he could split. That he split that with that capacity because our recycling fills up the truck so much. So, kudos to the town.
Yeah.
Can we do better? Yes, we have a plastic bag in the trash problem in Long Meadow as well as other places, and we'll be working on a campaign to try to educate the community about that.
I'm sorry, what's...
So the plastic grocery bags that you get from
Yeah.
the grocery store
Yeah.
are not recyclable. A lot of folks think plastic automatically goes in the plastic bin. Those do not.
They're recyclable, but not at the MRF.
So.
Okay.
And so the MRF gets them. It's a real problem in their contamination stream. And in Long Meadow, people think they're doing the MRF a favor, I think, by putting their junk mail in a plastic bag and putting that in the recycling, or putting their clear bottles and their brown bottles in a plastic bag and putting it in the recycling. But it's not doing anybody a favor. We don't want any plastic bags there. Bring your plastic bags back to the Big Y.
Right.
Bring them to Staples. Don't put them in the recycling bin.
Now, is it also true that pizza boxes, even though they're cardboard, don't go?
No, the new rules. We have.
It used to be anything that was contaminated,
this,
like with
right?
with the oils from the food, couldn't be
Yeah.
recycled. But I think the technology has come to a point where now they can. They accept
Well,
them.
we say clean pizza boxes. So we're asking you if it's a really funky, dirty one, rip out
Yeah.
that part and do the
Right.
rest.
Okay.
So it's working.
I'd be remiss not to mention how much work you do with our schools and the recycling programs with the janitors and some of the innovative things that you've got, like liquid reduction from the trash. And
Huge, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
it's kind of
kudos-
exciting what you do with the schools.
Kudos, it's not me. They do the work. The custodians have done a great job, and they continue to improve and do
Yeah, but
terrific work.
you were the leader.
Well, DEP helped promote it,
Right.
and I did that through my job.
But
so.
it is kind of unique to see all the janitors behind this program, and they are very serious about their recycling.
They are
at the
very
school.
proud of their recycling,
Yes.
and they should be. They do a great job, and it helps reduce the waste coming out of school and increase our recycling. So.
Right.
You wanted to talk about the amnesty, is that?
It is an agenda item, so I guess I would look at the chair.
Because we
Yeah,
wanted,
right.
as you're doing that, we want to promote, and we're going to have this on the website, I don't know what camera, what all the things you can recycle at the camera, all the things you can recycle during the holidays, so you don't have to use an extra bag or an extra barrel, because a lot of stuff that people are not aware of, perhaps like gift wrap, can be recycled, and really with all the wine and gift wrap, what else is there? And compost your.
I want to go to your house.
Yes.
Wine and
I
gift
have a very
wrap.
good dinner. We just eat leftovers all the time. But
Yeah, that's an ideal lead into the Christmas program.
I'll move that the select board in town grant a trash amnesty for the period of December 28th through December 28th, 2015 through January 2016, during which time residents can put out an unlimited amount of.
No.
A second?
One bag.
One additional bag or barrel.
It's one additional bag?
Bag or
A
barrel.
bag or barrel?
Bag.
Okay.
Bag is they're saying, so that's fine. One additional
Big bag.
big bag.
Bag.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But you don't really, you really can recycle a lot of that stuff.
Is there a second on that motion? Second motion. Any more discussion on that?
No, these bags, they have to purchase them, or can they just?
No, this is.
Regular house bags.
Regular
In other words,
bag.
currently you
Okay.
can put out one barrel or bag a week within the tax base, and any additional trash goes in that blue Long Meadow pay-as-you-throw bag. During these 2 weeks, the board is saying, instead of just the one
Yeah.
barrel or bag, you can put out an extra bag.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay. All in favor?
And
All
interestingly, just so you know, we don't see a big blip in trash. We see a big blip in recycling during the holidays.
Well, it's a lot of wrapping paper.
Yeah.
But that's recyclable.
No, that's
Yeah.
my point.
Cardboard's
Right.
recyclable.
That's why I don't.
Packaging.
Beer and
Yeah.
wine is bottles are
Right.
recyclable.
Right.
Yeah, that's recycling.
Um,
All right.
Is there anything else you wanted us to touch on?
The fuel tracking report was in here. I think it's mostly to show, obviously fuel prices have been trending more favorable since even we signed the contract with Waste Management. So we do expect a rebate. We just wanted to show the board that we do have a specific spreadsheet that we use monthly. We get the reports, we track it, so it's not like they can, it's not like we're unaware of where the fuel prices are.
So, yeah, can I, Stephen, can I just point out to everybody on the select board who may not know, is the contract we have with Waste Management is for picking up and taking away the trash from people's houses. It does not include the dumping of it, which is a separate contract we have with Covanta. And because of the discussion we had more than 5 years ago, they said, how do we know how to bid on a contract to pick stuff up when it all depends on the fuel costs, and we don't know what fuel's gonna cost 5 years from now. And so we actually separate the fuel out of the contract.
Fuel adjustment.
So there is a
clause in the
separate fuel
contract.
adjustment that goes on we track it monthly, but I thought it
We
was.
establish a baseline in negotiations, and
So-
then it's a way to adjust
So
it plus or minus.
we're paying for the fuel as it goes up and down, but that makes it good because when it goes down, we're actually saving money. And
Right.
it was much better and easier for the contractors to bid on it when they didn't have to try to guess what fuel was gonna be in 5 years. Okay.
Great, thank you again for your
Yes,
support.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation.
Okay, Nate, you want me to email, talk to you about this thing later?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Okay, we're gonna move on with the acceptance of some minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of the September 21st, 2015 Select Board meeting.
I'll second it.
Second, any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Aye.
And I abstained.
And one abstention.
I'll move we approve the minutes of the September 30th Special Select Board meeting.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Move we approve the minutes of the October 12th Special Select Board meeting.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Move we approve the minutes of the October 19th Select Board meeting.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
And I move we approve the minutes of the November 2nd Select Board meeting.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Great job, Debbie.
And actually, I'd like to make a motion. Now, I had said before that I was going to try to rewrite the meeting minutes for September 10th, 2015, the regional select board meeting,
Yeah.
because they were in the kind of the form of notes. I have to confess that having gone over it, I can't really improve upon it. So I would move that we approve the September 10th, 2015 select board minutes that were in our October 19th packet. So that's my motion to
Okay.
sort of clear that one away.
I'll second that.
Second?
Yep.
Any discussion? All in favor? We are clean on minutes.
Can I just, I was trying to, for some other reason, I was looking at our website. What's it gonna take to get us minutes? I was actually looking back a year or two, looking for the December minutes of our tax classification. It seems that we've got a lot of gaps in minutes posted. Is that possible?
They all should be on there. We should have been caught up.
Maybe I'll just give you a call, Steve, and go over it. I might be, but there's supposed to be an icon where the minutes are, and there's an icon where the agenda is. And I didn't do a very good job, I guess, of looking for it, but
It gives a date, and click on the date of the meeting.
I'll call you, Debbie.
On some of them, you have to click on a different year for some of them, but I'll have to check the
No,
select
I-
board.
this
The
is
specific
like-
select board?
This is like last year or the year before. I'll-
2014, he was
yeah,
talking about
yeah.
December 2014.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Did we finish select board comments?
Yes.
Everybody's finished, no other comments?
Town manager did his own.
Yeah, I've got 2 items.
Okay.
Just getting bedtime, right, Tom? All right, Stephen, how about a couple of one-liners?
Sure. I think I've mentioned in the past the wastewater treatment contract with the Water and Sewer Commission. Our 10-year agreement expired in June, at the end of June. The proposal they had made had recommended, had identified capital improvements that were gonna be shared based on a formula basis with all the communities, and even though communities did not put waste through those facilities, the Indian Orchard Pump Station is a good example for us, where we don't go anywhere near that. We obviously, Long Meadow and a few other communities, joined forces to highlight to the commission that even though the most recent 10-year agreement did technically include them as a part of the quote-unquote system, the original agreement made it clear that the intent of the arrangement was towns weren't gonna share in costs for things which they were not, through which they were not putting wastewater. So, we received a new 6-year proposal back. I've gone over it, I've sent it to town council. I'll be honest with you, in my first review of it, it's not clear to me whether or not they remedied that, so we are getting together and discussing it internally and going back over and meeting with the commission in December. And I'll keep the board apprised of how those discussions go.
Do you want questions while you go? Because there was a lot in here about that, and I just had a couple of questions, like, is this a maybe I shouldn't be doing this on camera, is this a negotiation, or is this a take it or leave it contract they're proposing?
I think they have, it looks like they have modified their proposal. So insofar as.
Well, there's a whole lot of
right,
add, delete changes in the track changes.
There was, and it's not all that, easy to understand, and the language, there are times where I read it, the first time I read it, I'm like, oh great, they saw our way of thinking, and then I went back and read it again, I'm like, wait, no, it doesn't sound like they came around. And so I need to go and meet with the DPW team and also talk to a few other communities and get their take on what the contract says. It's really not, I don't know what it means, and then get town council's take on it, but I think it's ultimately, like we said before, we're sending our wastewater there pretty much no matter what. So how much of a negotiation? Not much, but I think they've been willing to listen to us.
I guess, because part 2 of my comments is, because of the critical nature of this, because of the amount of money, because of the length of it, is it worth finding a specialist attorney to advise us on, I don't know what rights we have or how I'm just thinking out loud here. This is a big-time contract for us, and, but again, our backs, where are we gonna go? Is Bondi's Island or, nowhere else, so.
My response to that, Mark, is, it's no bigger a deal now than it was in the 1970s when we signed it the first time, when everything was getting built out. And Dave Martell has been involved in all of the contracts, and I think he's also reviewing it for other communities. If he finds that he needs a second set of eyes, we certainly would do that. But right now, this is one of those agreements that he's been involved with since the genesis, and so I trust his viewpoints on it. And as it's not easy. I didn't find the language approachable, but still only like a less than 10-page agreement.
I guess the question I have is there anything that we could see in there that they're increasing capacity or the infrastructure due to the casino project that we can say our costs are going up because of this? Can we look at mitigation money there?
I think that stuff's all been separated out.
You sure?
Yeah. In the last agreement, they had that stuff was not a part of the agreement. That was all, I think, separate with the city of Springfield. I think the city of Springfield has a separate agreement from us. But no, that's one of the questions we have. Where are the capital improvements? They were listed in the previous proposal. They're not listed now. Where'd they go? What does that mean? That's what we're trying to figure out. But I just want to let you know that the issue is moving, and they want to have some kind of resolution in the near future. So we are working on it. I think, as we noted, Bernie Lynch will be here again on Wednesday the 2nd at 7 p.m. at the library meeting room. another successful Wounded Warrior race. Donations and race registrations topped $10,000 again. Between volunteers, runners, and walkers, we had over 500 people. We had a great speaking program. I think it was just another enjoyable day. And the weather, once again took care of us. And I think everybody, I think it's really kind of cemented itself as an event people really look forward to and want to participate in every year.
So Steve, I just want to say, I've run a lot of road races and I've done over the years. This was, you guys were professional in the setup for the registration and it was really top notch for a local road race.
I appreciate that comment. One of the things that you had suggested that we did adopt was we added bananas. We had a lot of volunteers, and God bless them. You can't do the event without volunteers, but the volunteers that were working the banana and water station at the end of the race were the same ones who helped me load the kind of extra, like half went out there, the other half we kept on the stage because we didn't want everything out there. They ran out at their station and didn't go in to get we had people complain that they didn't get a banana at the end of the race, and then we had extra bananas left over, and I'm like, you guys were the ones who, that was more funny. I'll say, and this is not, this is really a comment about the people who work for the town, as well as other volunteers who, especially the Veterans Circle volunteers that, Richard's a part of that. The people who really pulled the weight on this, in the weeks leading up to the event, we just weren't, it felt like we were just kind of coasting into the event, and sometimes that makes me nervous, like we're not prepared well enough. And at the end of the event, it was affirmed again that we're so well prepared, and we spend a lot of time before the event, but also after the event, going through and saying what went right, what went wrong, that we really have worked out really many of the bugs that we experienced even the first year. So I appreciate that comment. I have very little to do with that other than supporting a great team of volunteers and town employees who really take it very personally to make sure that this thing comes off. So thank you for that. Long-range plan update. The next step, Dylan Sussman from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission did meet with the planning board. The planning board, based on his feedback, technically under the law, they are the board responsible for master planning. I've commented many times, we haven't done a lot of that here in town. They view themselves more as a regulatory body than a planning body, and I think they'd be more comfortable with myself and the board kind of leading the way on this effort and keeping them involved as a partner versus them leading the effort. One of the next steps is we're working on a survey that's going to ask some questions about choices that we'll need to make in the future and how people view those choices, and have a public forum for that. JCJ report.
Stephen, are we gonna get to look at that survey before it goes out?
We can. I mean, I think I don't know if was it in the packet? Did it
I
put
don't see it, no.
Okay. Yeah, we can.
Because, that's gonna really influence our discussion on the issue too, is what kind of questions are asked, so it might be helpful for the board to all look at that survey before it goes out, just to fine tune it a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
And I was actually confused about it. So it's just sort of like, it's all about services? It's not about land use?
It's about a lot of different stuff.
So it's not just what services?
I mean, it asks some very pointed questions. One of the reasons why I haven't touched it very much is because, they do these a lot. I do think it's good to see, for the board to see it. But they have some, I say, pride of authorship, if you will, based on their experience. But I do think we can certainly circulate it for board comment, and before we send it out. Right. Because I don't even know, I haven't had the discussion with them about how it's I think they have a set number that they're willing to mail. We have to figure out how we're gonna distribute it.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause it's part of their supplying the update on package, isn't it? On what they perceive.
Right.
And it should be an interesting survey. JCG?
JCJ. Yeah, the report on the middle schools, we really reorganized the draft, so it's not the content necessarily, but just the format of it, because it was kind of the document was difficult to get through. The version we got back is much more user-friendly, and right now we're just going through and reviewing it again. I met with the schools to go over it with the superintendent today, and they highlighted some issues some questions that they had you know, after reviewing the report, and we want to go back to the architect and get those sharpened up as well. But we haven't reported on it in a while. I just don't want you to think it was dead. It is ongoing. And, you know, I doubt anybody's watching us now, but just I do want to go back to the discussion very briefly about the public forum and just say that, you know, the point of the task force is to have members of the public in as the discussion goes. The reason why we're trying to get this information before we have a public forum is because if you have a public forum and someone says, well, can you even do it at, you know, will the Conservation Commission even sign off on Wolf Swamp Fields? We want to have an answer for that so the public can, not only, of course, we want to hear the views of the public on this issue, but we also want to educate them in terms of the work we've put into figuring out why these are the two sites in a pretty detailed way, and we just are in the process of lining up those details to answer those questions. It's not, you know, it's not an attempt to hide anything or railroad anything. It's just, let's get the right answers so when the questions we know are going to get asked at a public forum, we can give people the information. That's all.
Mhm. I was gonna add that too, because that's really where we're at, and we know there's gonna be more communication now, because we said after the town meeting, we start bringing more and more to the board, since we got X amount of things going down. You had the, one other item, you have that local, anybody have any other questions on the town manager's report?
I just want to ask him something. Richard and I just mentioned this before the meeting. Steve, what's going on with our brand-new street on Meriwether, and why is the gas company digging a hole to China in there?
They put in a new, I just learned this today, they put in a new length of main. They had talked to us about that last year, and I'll be honest with you, until I drove by and saw the trucks, I didn't know that they were gonna be out there. But they did commit to doing a curb, they call it curb-to-curb paving, instead of doing a trench.
Well, the hole's curb to curb, so they're gonna have to.
Yeah, but I mean, instead of doing a trench.
Really, is that bad?
Instead of doing a trench over that excavation where they only do it a couple feet wide, they're gonna repave the street. I don't know the limit of work, I haven't seen any of that, but we did push them to.
I mean, they got steel plates that literally go just about curb to curb.
Yeah, they're gonna do a much broader paving job than they would do in a normal trench, so.
Yeah. They've had their way on Meriwether, haven't they? Ever since the road was finished. This is the second or third time.
Yeah,
they've done the digging.
that hasn't gone well, and I know it's one of those things that looks terrible, and it looks like people don't know what they're doing. We meet with them at the beginning of the construction season, even when we're in design, we talk to them about what we're doing, and they say, yeah, but then they're a big organization. I don't sometimes think one level doesn't know what the other level's doing. So it's not like we don't communicate with them regularly, it just, I think sometimes they just get stuff handed down to them and they have to do it.
Well, and unlike the phone company, it's tough to argue with the gas company says, we've got a problem down there, we gotta dig up your brand new street.
Yeah.
And yet, who's to know why they're digging, I mean.
They keep the
It wasn't a
records.
repair, clearly. I mean, they've been in there for a week or more, so.
There was something that came up about the pressure testing, and we saw this on a larger scale on Wolf Swamp Road, but they have pressure testing, and then they have standards that they want the line to maintain, and, you know, it's expensive for them to do that work. So obviously, it's not something that they're doing just to make the people on Meriwether's lives miserable, because it's costly for them to be doing that stuff. You know, I get a resident complaint on, right over here, there's a telephone pole that's been laying on the tree belt for
6 months.
Yeah, and, you know, it's co-owned by Verizon and Eversource, but one has a maintenance area over here, and the other has a maintenance area over here, and, you know, a resident called, and they said, we'll call the utility company, but I gotta be honest with you, we're just another customer to them too. And so that's part of the frustration dealing with utilities, is that the town sometimes just doesn't have, you know, more pull than an individual resident. So I think the point if anybody is watching at home, is that we do take all the complaints seriously, and we do follow up on them. But sometimes it's beyond our control to you know, fix that one way or the other when it's in the utilities' hands.
And speaking of utilities in town, Paul, streetlights, any update or?
We did have, I did have a conference call with the representatives from Eversource, along with our consultant and an associate of Mr. Woodbury's, who is also knowledgeable in this area, trying to get the calculations out of them. It doesn't appear that the utility company is gonna budge. So, you know, I think we have to decide how we wanna move forward, if we want to, you know, again, pursue an action at the DPU, if we want to repurpose the grant for something else, or really those are the only two choices.
Richard, maybe we can schedule something in a future meeting.
Yeah, we can.
talk about that. in a-
Yeah, we can
Yeah,
schedule
I've
an
got
executive
on my
session.
running agenda.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
we can schedule an executive session to kind of catch up. And we didn't end up, and I don't know if it just fell off the radar screen for me, but we did not end up putting a warrant article on for the fall town meeting for some funds to
Right.
pursue this. Part of it was there were still kind of background conversations. Every time you bring somebody new in on our side, they say, well, I know somebody at Eversource, maybe I can move the needle. And it's far easier to try that approach because the DPU action is gonna be years in the making and costly, tens of thousands of dollars. So we've tried to exhaust every other option in getting this net book value issue addressed before we kind of hit the wall, but I think we're finally there.
And just as a perspective kind of comment, the kinds of savings we're talking about would pay for full-day kindergarten and then some.
Mhm.
You know, and so, you know, the value is there. Timing may not be, but the value is there.
There's a couple of large excavators on the conservation land
Mhm.
down by the community garden. What's going on?
They're gonna be digging through your backyard.
It looks like it.
That's a
There-
sewage job.
I believe there's a slip line project that I don't know if they're excavating or slip lining, but I believe it's a slip line job on Long Meadow Street, and they're just staging equipment there.
Oh, okay. Stay.
And we put them way around the corner where nobody should ever be able to see them, Tom. Because they are out of public view totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, general public wouldn't
I
even.
don't know if any of you have any call. I mean, this is something that we occasionally get calls on. When we sign a general contract for construction work, they have a site, like the area, the limit of work is the site, and they get to own the site, and they can have unregistered vehicles on that site because their insurance covers them for that area, and that's why they have stuff. I know on Crestwood we had our project, and there was just stuff piled. I'm sure you went in. There's stuff piled everywhere, and some people, and it's somewhat unsightly, and especially if it's parked on the street, it's tough to get around.
The slip line's gonna be right out in front of Tom's house, isn't it? Right out on Long Meadow Street? Seriously.
I honestly don't know.
I think it is. I think it's very close to that area up there.
Right, I mean, they want to
That's
stage
where the
nearby,
stage
because they don't want to be running back and forth. But the point of the comment is, the contractor is allowed to keep equipment on the site for the duration of the contract.
Right.
And a lot of times, they don't have their heavy equipment registered to be on the road, because they'll haul it on a trailer back and forth to the site. But as long as they're on that site, their insurance and everything is covered, so that's why they can leave the stuff there.
Yeah, they can take our driveway.
Yeah. Stephen,
Thank you.
Anything else for Stephen? Stephen, Alex?
And I noticed in the report about the police, there were 3 heroin overdoses.
Mhm.
It sounds like, thank goodness, they didn't die. I guess my comment is sort of toward our select board members, because, when I brought this up in April, there was this notion, maybe it's not that big of a deal, because, at least in Long Meadow, because it's seniors overdosing on medication. I mean, we're in the midst of a crisis, and I'd like to see us come up with a more comprehensive approach to all the things we can do to try to avoid this, because I think it's, unfortunately, this wave is gonna hit us as well, and I'm just, it's getting bad out there. I mean, heroin's getting cheaper, and more people are using it.
What would you mean on a comprehensive approach?
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is, what are we doing to prevent the drugs from coming in?
Mhm.
What are we doing for education? I mean, one of the issues for the school committee is, do we have guidance counselors, in all of schools? Are we educating kids in the elementary and middle school level? I mean, this is really, as I said in April, a call to action. We haven't done a call to action. It's kind of, the attitude has been not in Long Meadow. But, I think this is bearing out that everything that's happening in Massachusetts, everything that's happening in this country is happening here.
Well, I think, didn't their survey, it pinpointed what the stats showed at that point? It didn't say we didn't have a problem. It said the worst problem seemed to be in the senior community, wasn't it? That was the highest percentage of the drug-related problems at the time they took the survey.
For opioids.
Yeah, for opioids.
But not heroin. The heroin thing had been something that, I think when we reported on this some months ago, it was more opioids than heroin. But I think you're right, this latest spike is really alarming.
But I mean, it's very consistent with I mean, this is not a surprise. I mean,
No.
unless we think we've got a fortress around
We were only
here.
reporting on what actually happens here in Long Meadow.
Right,
I mean,
right.
everyone knows that everyone can read the newspapers, and the Chief Stankiewicz and Chief Sienna before him were actively engaged with the Western Mass Police Chiefs Association. There are a lot of different ways we do, that the police department does try and curb this. And I think, as you can see in his report, he's working on some programmatic innovations, not the least of which is the Narcan deployment in the cruisers, and the K-9 unit to help combat this problem.
I got a note on it, Alex. Okay.
Richard, there's one more agenda item, and it's the Local Community Mitigation Advisory Committee.
Mhm.
So, Stephen, do I presume that you're getting kicked off that local, or somebody was looking to kick you off that local Community Mitigation Advisory Committee because you're a town employee? I mean, did I read that correctly?
Well,
That's-
the Ethics Commission gave an opinion that if you're on this, the local, let me give some background. The Local Community Mitigation Advisory Committee, the LCMAC, is something that was set up in the Massachusetts Expanded Gaming Act. And the purpose of the LCMACs is to provide guidance on how the formula community mitigation funds, meaning not the stuff covered by our agreement with MGM, but the formula ones that they have, I think it's $100,000 a year per community, how those should be distributed and for what purposes. And so the LCMAC provides guidance to the Community Mitigation Advisory Committee, which is a state level committee, and then they in turn advise the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. I think when I showed this to you before, there was like all these layers in between the LCMAC, and so counterintuitively, the State Ethics Commission called the LCMAC participants state employees, because we would have a role in advising the state, but that's, with all the layers in between, I felt that was a kind of a stretch, but nevertheless, they made that decision, and under the conflict of interest law, you can't be a special state employee and a municipal employee. So, one of the ways that we can resolve that is I can delegate locally the responsibility for handling mitigation here in the town, to another town employee. Or I can continue to be the point person for that, and another person can be appointed to the LCMAC. My thought was to designate the DPW director, Mario Mazza, to be the point person locally for community mitigation at this time. Because for right now, the mitigation we're dealing with, and we're going to be giving a presentation on a status at a upcoming meeting, is really largely centered on the traffic. That was the 4 intersections were kind of the upfront work that we were going to do. Based on what actually happens after when the casino opens, we'll learn more about what the shift is between public safety, public works, other impacts on services. And so Mario may no longer be the appropriate person. And in the meantime, the Ethics Commission may rethink this opinion based on how because these committees have never functioned. We are all the front runners on this, and so it may play out differently where then someone can have the same roles. I think I'll be honest, I'll be candid and say that the gaming commission's ombudsman's office has strongly encouraged me to remain a part of the LCMAC because as town manager, I am a good bridge between on the ground operational considerations, but also the policy concerns at the Gaming Act level, especially since Long Meadow got to a level of depth that most other communities didn't get in this process by going all the way through the arbitration. So they have encouraged me to remain a part of the LCMAC, but there are 2 different options.
Well, Steve, would there be conflict of interest if you were reporting or making requests to this committee, and then someone from our town, Mr. Mazza was there, and you're his supervisor, that could get complicated also.
According to I talked to the attorney who wrote the opinion,
Yeah.
and they said, "Oh no, you can delegate that," which
Makes no
He debated
intuitive
it
sense
too.
at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess more to follow on this, isn't there?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it depends.
I mean, you don't appeal the State Ethics Commission. It is, their ruling is their ruling,
Well,
right?
it was an informal opinion was what they got. But I asked her
okay.
informally, would I be okay to delegate the responsibility for mitigation to another town employee? And she seemed to think that that was okay.
Did you say that the employee reported to you?
Yeah, you mentioned the grade, you mentioned what his position was.
I did.
Yeah.
I checked it out. I mean, I mean, the key thing is to play it straight. You don't want to get the town in a bind. So I tried to ask the questions and get basically the best understanding I possibly could, so we could bring it back here and have a discussion about it. You know, like I said, it's either way. You know, we're going to be involved. So I just wanted to. I guess my recommendation would be, for now. You know, I can you know, like I said, and I think what you'll see is when we get the presentation on some of the engineering and traffic work we're looking at. You know, Mario really is stepping up and taking a leadership role on that. I think it's appropriate for him to do that at this time. When it comes to the policy considerations, I think right now I'm uniquely qualified to represent the town's interest at the local community mitigation advisory committee level. But again, that may change too. That we may have somebody else who can do a good job with that. But I will, you know, the board appoints the representative, so it's up to you.
You got to think about it. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, this kind of was a surprise to me when I read about it, so I'm not prepared to make that, just
It's
trying
somewhat
to find.
the only thing is, it's somewhat time sensitive because they do need to move forward with the meetings. They've held off having these community mitigation advisory committee meetings while the membership issues get sorted out, and
Well, should we get an official opinion on it, Stephen?
not from the ethics commission. It would be the ombudsman's office would have to request that, not us. And I already asked about that, and that's months in the making.
And do we
The
know
path
what-
of least resistance was the two options I laid out.
Do we know what other local
Yeah.
communities are doing for those appointments?
I don't know how everyone else is impacted by this. Based on the first meeting, you know, I think like there are certain people who are represented by a select board member. There are people who are represented by, you know, a community member. You know, I think there's different ways to do it. Like I said, the only, you know, I was appointed to be the representative of the local committee at the state level. And that was somewhat of a reflection of the knowledge that we gained here by going through the process. So I think it was an acknowledgement by the local committee that I was, you know, somewhat more, not saying informed, but more knowledgeable, I guess, of the specifics of the Gaming Act and the impact on local community mitigation than some of the others who were involved. So they wanted me to be the one who goes to Boston to make the larger policy recommendations. So which is why I thought, and when I spoke to the ombudsman, and like I said, he said, you know, we really love to keep you part of this. And so when I said, well, can I delegate the authority to somebody else? That's what he said. They said, when this has come up in other towns, that what first gave me the thought of delegating it to another employee was the suggestion, and I don't know which town it was, but the suggestion was made that other communities are dealing with this by having someone else be kind of set aside as the local person for handling mitigation issues and making, you know, basically if there's gonna be a grant applied for mitigation funds for, you know, raised crosswalks, new traffic light, whatever you wanna call it, that employee, in this case Mario, would be the one that would prepare and submit that application on behalf of the town.
Would you have to recuse yourself from that?
The board, the local, and this is the thing that makes the opinion so kind of tough to swallow, is that we don't advise on any of that. I mean, our advice is like to another subgroup to the gaming commission.
I'm saying is, would you have to recuse, like he's working as a town employee, would you have to have no involvement in that?
I don't know that the guidance is all that clear on that, but, you know,
I mean, I guess that would, I mean.
in theory.
I mean, like, that would be, you know, I mean, it's a strange ethics opinion.
It really, and they've talked about how this has come up with like a school districts, like being an employee for a school district. I mean, a shared, like a Hampton Wilbraham, a shared,
Yeah.
you know, a regional district, yeah, a regional district. So it's somewhat unusual, and that's why I think my recommendation would be to stay the course for now, because I think things may shake out that will make this a little easier to understand and manage. If it gets to the point where it's not, and I feel like I can't fulfill my obligation to the town as town manager by being a part of this thing, I'll be the first person to let you know.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Yes, Marie?
Motion to adjourn?
But, I mean, do we have consensus that, because the only vote would be to change me as the LCMAC member.
Yeah.
If the consensus is hang in there for now and Mario will take the lead in the mitigation stuff, then there's no vote needed, but I do need to know that.
I'd like to see it as an agenda item personally, but
Yeah,
It is an
well,
agenda
I guess what,
item. It is an agenda item.
It is an agenda item. I guess what bothers me, and Stephen mentioned this, and I knew it was going to be put on, is that the letter here said that they were gonna check with the Ethics Commission, and they recommended the LCMA members do go to the Ethics Commission one-on-one.
Which I did.
But it would seem like they would issue something formal.
The Ethics Commission, I mean.
It's in flux.
They give you the informal opinion, but then once you ask them for the formal opinion, they meet, and the commission meets, and they vote on it, and it takes months.
Yeah.
Most things are done by these letters that are informal opinions. Like when you call the attorney of the day, that's their answer. It's not necessarily the final, I mean, if you wanted a formal opinion because you didn't like it, but, it's just not in the context of the ethics, because I did ask Richard.
Yeah, well, I know you did, because you mentioned this, but I mean, it's really odd the way they've left it, because,
I think everyone agrees with that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think, they give you some advice, and then if it's kind of wide enough that you, as you move forward, then if there's a problem, then they let you know, oh, no, this is definitely a problem, but, I think the other side is that we would know. I mean, you would know that if there was a committee that Mario was on, and then you had to present information to that committee, that would be problematic, because you're a supervisor, it would be a conflict of interest, he wouldn't be able to vote on it, and that sort of thing, and so, but if that's not something that's gonna happen, then we don't need to worry about it.
I think in practice, it's highly unlikely that's gonna happen.
Yeah,
That's why I think,
then that's-
I think that's why she said, yes, you can delegate it, because it's so unlikely for that to happen.
Good,
So,
then let's,
so.
do we need to just vote on that, or just,
Only if you're gonna replace me as the LCMAC member.
okay?
So Stephen, the question that I have is, most value to the town of you would be to, in my opinion, directing the use of mitigation funds that we have already gotten committed to the town, which is a one-time check, and then someday, if and when the casino opens, repeated annual checks, as opposed to implementing and discussing funds and mitigations that may never happen, that are certainly theoretical but not practical. My personal sense is I'd rather see you focused on the here and now and the money we got in hand, and to recuse yourself, or whatever the phrase comes to be, that says we've got somebody who's the director of the DPW and new to the town, taking charge of multi-millions of dollars, and alternatively to say, well, he's gonna do it on paper, but I'm actually gonna run it, doesn't meet the spirit or perhaps even the letter of this separation of activities. So my personal opinion is, I don't know how much value we're gonna have, or you're gonna have on this, for the town of Long Meadow, not to the process, not necessarily to the committee, but to the town of Long Meadow by serving on this LCMAC.
But I think that, to your point, I think this ethics issue only applies to the community mitigation funding applications, not our arbitration award. I think it only applies for the process of managing these applications. I can get further information on that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you can really say that the 100,000 that this committee's gonna be moving towards is not something we can realize. I think it still could be funds if we really have someone in there fighting and working for it.
It's reserved for us, it just is, I don't need the person running lead on preparing the application.
Yeah, this is crazy.
It is somewhat.
Yeah, when is the final decision have to be made on this, Steve?
I think weeks behind everybody else because it took
Okay.
me 2 weeks to get in touch with the person from the Ethics Commission.
Okay, can we, well, let's kick it for 2 weeks, okay?
Okay.
And see if you can get some more information, or everybody have a time to read through this and share your ideas. It's kind of a strange one.
Can we do this? Can you guys email me the questions you have, and then I can go back to either the Ombudsman's office, or the Ethics Commission?
Yeah, I'd like them to give you a yes or no.
That's not
They're not gonna do that.
Yeah, I mean,
She gave me a yes on the delegation issue.
yeah, well, if she gave you yes on the delegation issue and she put it in writing, then you've got your
Well,
answer.
she didn't put it in writing, but I
Yeah.
can,
Well,
I can.
see, that's where, to me, the delegation, the opinion's only good if it's in writing. And it's
Yeah.
only good if all of the conditions are set forth, so that there's a full understanding of the opinion writer of what they're opining on. Because otherwise, they'll come back later and say, well, I didn't know that, and I would have changed my opinion if I had known it.
And my concern is not for anything except that we're doing it right, and that we don't get caught sideways, because we are such an important community on this.
Well, my concern, Richard, is that somebody then uses it as a reason, well, that's why you can't have the money.
Well, that's what I mean.
That's,
And- and-
that's the ultimate getting.
And I would also testify to Pat, it is time that you shift some stuff to Mario, and he's certainly a capable man to take over, because you have to have somebody in behind you that's capable of handling some of these tasks.
I mean, in theory, if you appointed a select board member to the LCMAC, that you'd still have the same issue,
Yeah,
because I report to the select board.
right.
So I mean, it's not.
But you only report to 5 of us, not to
Right,
one
but
of
it's,
us.
Yeah.
I'll pull the string on this one a
Okay.
little more and see where
Yeah.
it goes.
Okay, now, Marie, you had mentioned something earlier?
Motion to adjourn?
Yes, a motion to adjourn. Is it seconded?
Second.
Any other comments for the good? No, seeing none? Okay, we'll fully adjourn. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you in a couple of weeks, and we appreciate you joining in tonight.
All those in favor?
All those in favor? Yeah, I thought we got the all those in favor. Have a good night, everyone. Here's that.